Chapter 462. At that moment, thousands of small swords seemed to have turned into a huge dragon made of metal blades. Countless sharp blades shone with cold light under the sun. The densely packed small metal swords covered most of the sky. Under Chonghua's command, these small metal swords were like obedient fish. They gathered together, and the tip of the sword was pointed at Qin Wanqing, who was charging towards him at high speed. Seeing the flying swords like rain, Qin Xueqing was not afraid at all. She brazenly faced them with her bare hands. Warriors did not need weapons because their bodies were the most powerful weapons. Qin Xueqing infused her vital essence into her limbs and bones, so that a layer of faint light appeared on her originally slightly white skin. From a distance, she was like a bodhisattva carefully carved out of cold jade. It was exactly like the old saying in books: skin of ice, bones of jade, makeup of jade. Do not fear the angry eyes of the bodhisattva. Although Qin Xueqing's momentum was strong, but it was a pity that her exploration of martial arts was still at the beginning stage. Now, with only her mortal body, how could she resist Chonghua's phoenix perch scorchtail box? Countless small metal swords kept hitting Qin Xueqing's protective shield. At first, Qin Wanqing could still rely on the quintessential essence in her body to repel the small swords. However, as wave after wave of flying swords continued to attack, Qin Wanqing's protective shield couldn't help but begin to weaken. Soon, a small metal sword successfully pierced through her protective shield. Qin Xueqing could not dodge in time. This small sword immediately left a shallow wound on her face. This was just the beginning. As soon as the protective shield was broken, the small metal swords swarmed up like crazy bees. Seeing this, Qin Xueqing decisively abandoned her own defense. At the price of sacrificing the protective shield, she instantly increased her speed by a lot. Of course, the result of this was obvious. Countless small wounds suddenly appeared on Qin Xueqing's body. Chonghua had been deliberately keeping a distance from Qin Xueqing. Every time Qin Xueqing took a step forward, he would decisively take a step back. Seeing Qin Xueqing suddenly accelerate, Chonghua didn't react in time, and Qin Xueqing successfully closed in on him. "Bitch, do you really think I'm afraid of you?" Chonghua was also quite experienced in facing enemies. Seeing that Qin Xueqing was too strong, he didn't panic at all. A fierce look flashed in his eyes, and then he suddenly pulled out a 3-feet-long sword from the phoenix perch scorchtail case. This was the primordial sword, and also one of the most important parts of the phoenix perch scorchtail case. Very few people knew about the existence of the primordial sword. Ever since Chonghua obtained the phoenix perch scorchtail box, he had been using it as a killing move. Chonghua had always been arrogant because of his talent, and his heart was higher than the sky. How could he tolerate Qin Wanqing chasing after him like a dog? Today, he was also forced into a corner by Qin Xueqing. Therefore, Chonghua no longer retreated. After pulling out the primordial sword, he slashed at Qin Xueqing, who was swinging her palm at him. In the rain of swords, Qin Xueqing was about to attack. Chonghua pulled out his sword to meet her. Bam! With a loud sound, the vital essence caused by the collision of the two instantly tore the small town below into ruins. Yi nervously waited at the side, so he clearly saw the entire process of the two fighting. Therefore, as soon as the two separated, Yi hurriedly rushed to Chonghua's side. "Chonghua, are you okay?" "I'm fine." Chonghua gloomily wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and said coldly, "I almost fell into this B*T's trap again." In the moment when they exchanged blows, Qin Xueqing suddenly changed her move. Her left hand pressed against the long sword and her palm hit the spine of the sword, trying to knock the long sword out of Chonghua's hand. At the same time, she immediately raised her other hand and slapped Chonghua's chest. Chonghua had taken the full brunt of this palm, so even now, he could still feel his blood and qi churning in his body. "It's nothing serious, don't worry." Yi wanted to heal Chonghua, but Chonghua shook his head and refused. Then he lowered his head to look at the ruins below. That D*MB*, wasn't she lying in the ruins of the small town, covered in blood? Although she had successfully injured Cheng-Hua with her reckless fighting style, she had also paid a heavy price for it. Speaking of which, Qin Xueqing was once again at a disadvantage because she didn't have a magic treasure. She hadn't expected. Cheng-Hua's true killing move wasn't the twin sword in his hand, but the Phoenix Perch Scorched Tail box beside him. The Phoenix Perch Scorched Tail box was refined by a Dongshu cultivator. It didn't look big, but it contained nearly 10,000 small metal swords. With Cheng-Hua's cultivation, he could only use a third of them. The rest of the sub-swords were all hidden in the sword box. Although Cheng-Hua couldn't control the remaining sub-swords normally, he could still detonate the Phoenix Perch Scorched Tail box and release all the sub-swords in the box in an instant. Just like the principle of a fragmentation grenade, once the Phoenix Perch Scorched Tail box exploded, it would not only set off a powerful shockwave, but also release countless sub-swords to increase the destructive power of the explosion. A 9th-grade spirit treasure could explode just like that. Cheng-Hua had really put in a lot of effort this time. But then again, a 9th-grade spirit treasure in exchange for the life of a golden core cultivator. This seemed to be a good deal? Division Chief Qin. Division Chief Qin. Are you okay? Please answer. Please answer. Whether it was Huaxia or the United States, the satellites of the two countries had been monitoring the small town from afar. But because Cheng-Hua and Qin Xueqing both had vital essence protecting their bodies, the satellites couldn't directly capture the situation of their battle. Now that the battle was over, Qin Xueqing's figure finally appeared on the surveillance satellite. The keyhole satellites of the United States had reached a resolution of 0.05 meters. They could basically see license plates directly, so the moment Qin Xueqing appeared, the surveillance satellite immediately locked onto her. However, the moment she saw the big screen, Wang Chuanju was stunned. She saw Qin Xueqing lying in the ruins, covered in blood. Her clothes were stained with blood, and at the same time, her face was also blurred. She just lay quietly in the ruins of the small town. She didn't move at all. No one knew whether she was dead or alive. Qin Xueqing? At that moment, Wang Chuanju felt as if she had been struck by lightning. She couldn't even stand properly. If it weren't for the staff members' quick reflexes, this famous Iron Lady would have fallen to the ground on the spot. Qin Xueqing had lost. This news seemed to have grown wings. It didn't take long for the news to spread all over the Wulian. Wang Chuanju sat on the chair with a dull look in her eyes. Although she liked power, she wasn't the kind of ruthless person who would abandon her family for power. Qin Xueqing had only fought with her permission, because she had confidence in her daughter. Who would have thought the result would be like this? At that moment, Wang Chuanju's heart was dead. Leader, why don't you rest for a while? The higher-ups have already sent reinforcements. The 3 big shots are moving together. They should be able to make it. Director Qin is strong. Even if she's injured, it's not a big deal. You don't know the exact situation here, so don't worry too much. We have to have confidence in Director Qin. The staff carefully comforted Wang Chuanju. However, Wang Chuanju seemed to have lost her soul. She stared at the screen without moving. After a long while, she seemed to have suddenly thought of something. She actually jumped up from the chair excitedly. The staff at the side was shocked by Wang Chuanju's actions. He was about to go up and comfort her when Wang Chuanju pushed him away. Then, she quickly took out her phone from the cabinet. Please remember the domain name of this book. .com, Wonderful Book House. Chapter 463. These few days, Chen Shi's life was quite fulfilling. In addition to taking care of the little girl's daily life, he also had to be careful not to let his wife get lost. Speaking of which, Qin Ruing was really like an old person with Alzheimer's. She didn't talk much. Every day, after sending the little girl to school with Chen Shi, she would wander aimlessly on the streets. No matter how Chen Shi tried to strike up a conversation with her, Qin Ruing didn't care at all. They used to be very close, but now they were gradually drifting apart. Of course, these seemingly estranged situations were, in fact, only superficial. In fact, every time when the little girl was out of school, Chen Shi only had to say that Nian Nian was out of school, and Qin Ruing would immediately stop and look back at him silently. At this time, Shi would immediately call for a taxi, and then the couple would take a taxi back to school to pick up the little girl. Day after day, the cycle repeated itself. Although Shi was still a little worried about Qin Ruoying's situation, he didn't panic because of this. Anyway, the soul mirror was in his hands, and Yuhuan Tianzuan was imprisoned in Saturn Ring by him. They had been separated for too long, and now that they were finally reunited, how could Shi leave so easily? In addition, the soul mirror seemed to have run out of energy recently. No matter how he tried, the soul mirror didn't respond. Therefore, Shi planned to wait for a while until his life gradually stabilized, then he would find time to return to Saturn Ring to have a good chat with Yuhuan Tianzuan. At that time, wouldn't Yingying's situation be solved? But then again, after returning home this time, Shi obviously felt that his life was a little different from before. The reason was the little girl. Nianyan was more than 6 years old. Generally, from this time onwards, the burden on the shoulders of the parents would become a lot lighter. After all, the child spent half of her time in school every day. The school shared a portion of the responsibility for the parents, so the parents naturally didn't have to work as hard as before. At this stage, the child's academic performance and performance in school would become the main concern of every parent. And what was Nianyan's greatest strength? Wasn't she smart and sensible? Whenever the school arranged an exam, the little guy's results would always be the first in his grade. As for her performance in school, there was no need to mention it. Some time ago, at the request of the school, the teacher gave each child in the class an application form for joining the Young Pioneers. After Nianyan submitted her application, the school quickly approved it. Because they were still in the first grade, there were only 10 places in each class. With Nianyan's usual performance, there was naturally no problem for her to enter the first batch. Therefore, as the class monitor, she led her classmates to stand under the national flag and made a declaration to join the team. At the same time, she stood on the podium with the same batch of young pioneers and sang the Young Pioneer song. We are the successors of communism. Inherit the glorious tradition of our revolutionary forefathers. Love the motherland, love the people. A bright red scarf fluttering in front of our chests. Needless to say, from then on, the way her classmates looked at her was a little different. Perhaps it was because Nianyan had hit someone when she first entered the school, so the children in the class were a little afraid of her. After she became a young pioneer and wore a bright red scarf, her classmates were no longer so afraid of her. Instead, they became very respectful of her. Although she was the class monitor, she never tattled to the teacher. Because even the most mischievous of classmates didn't dare to jump in front of her. Nianyan almost became the leader of the class. Whenever her classmates went overboard during class or made loud noises during self-study, she only needed to glare fiercely at them, and the students she stared at would instantly wilt like eggplants that had been hit by frost. All of these behaviors were seen by the teacher. Who didn't like outstanding children? Although Nianyan was only a first-grade student, by the time she reached the second grade, the title of 3 good students was basically guaranteed. Nianyan was so worry-free, so she naturally didn't have to worry too much. Therefore, as the child grew up day by day, he, as the father, became more and more free. On this day, she sent Nianyan to school as usual. When he was about to leave, he happened to meet Nianyan's class teacher. The teacher pulled him aside and praised him, which almost made she burst out laughing. Yingying, did you hear that? Every teacher is praising our Nianyan. This child is really becoming more and more sensible. After parting with the teacher, she was still very proud of himself. Qin Ring walked quickly in front, and he bragged about his daughter's excellence behind her. There was a detail here that was worth noting. In the past, she could only hang about 10 meters behind Qin Ru. He didn't expect that after a few days, he would be able to stick to Qin Ruoying's 2 to 3 meters behind her. Qin Ruoying's attitude towards him didn't seem to change much, but the distance between the two was constantly closing. Therefore, he successfully climbed onto Yingying's bed. This became Shi's main goal at the moment. In order to achieve this goal as soon as possible, Shi worked hard. And the little sweetness that constantly emerged in the process of this struggle was really not worth mentioning to outsiders. Ying, you went to Dongzaiman yesterday? Hey, that's Pan Garden, you've been there too. Look, you've already walked around this ring, why don't I'll take you to the Summer Palace today, okay? That place used to be a royal garden, there are mountains and rivers, and there's a lot of vegetation. It's much better than this reinforced concrete. Qin Ruing didn't speak the whole time. No matter how Chen Shi tried to talk to her, she acted as if she didn't hear him. However, when Chen Shi gave her directions, Qin Ruing reacted, so she didn't continue to walk down Chang'an Avenue. Qin Ruing stopped walking, as if she was thinking about where she should go now. Seeing this, Chen Shi suddenly thought of something and quickly added, "Oh yeah, I've taken Yin Yin there before, she really likes it there, so I guess you'll like it too." Hearing this, Qin Ruing turned around and looked at him. She seemed to be moved by Chen Shi's suggestion, so for the first time ever, she said, "Let's go." But Chen Shi was overjoyed. He quickly waved his hand to hail a taxi, then he helped Qin Ruing into the car. However, just as he was excitedly introducing Summer Palace to Qin Ring, an ear-piercing ringtone suddenly rang. "Hey, Ying, hold on, I need to take this call." Chen Shi picked up the phone, but there was no number displayed on it. He hesitated for a moment, then considering that he usually didn't receive any harassing calls, the caller should be someone he knew, so he finally pressed the answer button. "Hello? Who's this?" "Chen Shi. It's me. Second aunt." As soon as the call connected, Wang Chuanju's slightly anxious voice sounded from the other end of the phone. When Chen Shi heard the sobbing tone in her voice, she immediately frowned and asked, "Auntie, what's wrong? Did something happen?" "Qin Qing was injured by someone. Those people might even take her life. Second aunt, I beg you, please save Qin Qing. Please remember the domain name of this book, .com, Wonderful Book House." Chapter 464. Something happened to Qin Qing. The moment she heard this, even Chen Shi couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. His sister-in-law had only left home for a few days. How could something have happened to her? Chen Shi was well aware of Qin Xueqing's abilities. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that even if his sister-in-law met Jiang Yan, she could still barely last 2 or 3 moves against him. Although his sister-in-law was no match for Jiang Yan, if Jiang Yan really wanted to take her down, he would still have to put in a lot of effort. After all, Qin Xueqing was a cultivator at the Golden Core stage. If she couldn't beat him, wouldn't she know how to run? Could it be that her bad temper was acting up again? Why did he end up in such a hopeless situation because he had to compete with others? Wang Chuanju had always been strong. Now that she was calling Chen Shi, her voice sounded like she was about to cry. So even if Chen Shi used his but to think, he could tell that the situation might be serious. Even if the entire Wu Yan family was mobilized, they probably wouldn't be able to solve this problem in a short period of time. His sister-in-law was family after all. Chen Shi naturally couldn't refuse. Thus, he quickly replied, "Second aunt, don't worry. Send me the location. I'll rush over and see what's going on." But after hanging up, Wang Chuanju immediately sent the location of the town to Chen Shi's phone. At this moment, Chen Shi seemed to suddenly remember something. He quickly said to Qin Ruing, "Ying, something happened to Qin Qing. I have to go and see." Qin Ruing glanced at him indifferently. She didn't seem to know who Qin Qing was at all. Seeing her cold expression, Chen Shi could only shake his head and sigh. What should he do? Bring Ying with him? She probably wouldn't agree at all. But if he left Ying here alone, Chen Shi would feel a little uncomfortable. He wasn't really afraid that Ying would get lost, but he was afraid that she would feel lonely. In such a big city like Shangjing, she was unfamiliar with the people and the place. Where could she go by herself? Chen Shi was a little hesitant. Qin Ruing seemed to have suddenly understood his difficulties. She suddenly said, "You go, I'll go by myself." Just 7 words. This was the longest sentence that Qin Ruing had said to Chen Shi during this period of time. Hearing this, Chen Shi couldn't help but smile. After he quickly signaled the driver to stop by the side, he quietly left a restriction on Qin Ruing. At the same time, he didn't forget to remind her, "Ying, don't run around. I'll come back to find you as soon as I'm done here." Nian Yin gets out of school at 4 o'clock. We'll pick her up together. You know that kid's temper. If she doesn't see you after school, she'll definitely be angry with me again. She leaned on the car door and kept muttering. When the driver was a little impatient, he reluctantly got up and waved goodbye to Ru. Oh, right, Ying, I put a lot of cash in my bag. If you see anything you like, buy anything, don't save money. It's okay if you run out of cash. You have a payment app on your phone. There's money in it. The taxi gradually went away. Shi was still standing on the side of the road. He kept waving in the direction of the car. It was only a temporary separation, but he made it seem like a separation of life and death. This made the passers-by stunned. It wasn't until the car merged into the traffic and completely disappeared from his sight that Shi slowly retracted her arm and turned to walk into a side alley. At this time, Qin Ruoying, who had already left in the car, seemed to have just noticed the wallet that Shi deliberately put on the seat. She picked up the wallet and opened it. Good Lord, it was full of $100 bills. The wallet was stuffed to the brim. It was as if it was not filled with money at all, but with Shi's concern for her. Girl, I can see that your husband is really good to you. It's rare to see a man as considerate as him these days. You two have children already, right? Uncle is experienced. Husband and wife quarrel at the head of the bed, but make up at the end. So, I'll take the liberty of advising you. It's about time you give him a way out. This man, although loosening and tightening can firmly tie his heart, you have to do it in moderation, right? The driver was an old man. He had been secretly observing the two of them ever since they got on the car. According to his understanding, this must be a young couple having a conflict, so he smiled and put in a good word for Shi. Qin Ruoying sat in the back without saying anything. So the driver did not notice that a faint smile had already appeared on her lips. In the sky above the small town, after Changhua detonated the Phoenix Perch charred tail box to knock down Qin Xueqing, he and Yi discussed how to deal with this woman. Why don't we just kill her? Although he succeeded in seriously injuring Qin Xueqing, Changhua actually did not feel good. After all, he took a solid hit from that palm, so Qin Xueqing's true essence kept wreaking havoc in his body. This true essence was extremely rich. Not only did it disrupt his breathing, but it also left some internal injuries in his body. It was a good thing that Qin Ruoying did not have a magic weapon. Otherwise, this palm would have directly hit his internal organs and caused him to be in pain. No, we haven't figured out the details of the Tianshu ruins yet. We can't kill her so rashly. Yi reached out to stop Changhua. After thinking for a while, he frowned and continued, the commotion just now was too big and you're already injured. Since the inheritance of the Tianshu ruins is still there, then we should do things more safely. Now that the enemy is in the dark and we are in the light, it's a big taboo for a military strategist. So let's take this woman and retreat first, find a place to wait for you to recover first. Yi's analysis was very reasonable. After hearing this, Changhua thought for a while, then nodded and replied, okay, I'll listen to you, but where should we go now? Where should we go? His voice fell. Not only was Yi stunned, but even Changhua who said this was stunned. Because the first, where should we go, was said by him. But the second, where should we go, was definitely not said by him. The two, where should we go, sounded almost at the same time. Changhua and Yi were stunned for a full 2 or 3 seconds, then they lowered their heads to look at the source of the sound. They saw a strange man suddenly appear in the ruins of the town. The man stood so casually beside Qin Xueqing, but Changhua and Yi did not know when he came. Who are you? Changhua was shocked and subconsciously wanted to attack this man. But at this time, Yi pulled him behind him, then directly took out his life source magic weapon, the Tian Luo umbrella. Once the Tian Luo umbrella was taken out, it was like a cloud suddenly shrouded the ruins. The sky instantly darkened. Yi's expression was stern. Almost without any hesitation, he directly launched the fiercest attack on this man, and the first move was a killing move. Crown Cloud Shadow, Hidden Killing Intent. The Tian Luo umbrella expanded at the speed of the naked eye, then like a large net, from top to bottom, directly enveloped the man. Seeing this, the man chuckled coldly. Didn't the teacher teach you? Children are disobedient. you'll get beaten up. This is too much. Once I start writing my daily routine, I say I'm water. Then I'll have to trouble you big bosses. Next time you see someone leave a comment saying I'm only a cultivator and not a stay-at-home dad, help me explain properly. This is King Water. How am I going to write my daily routine? The above is all a joke. To be honest, I've greatly reduced the daily routine. Now I'm writing the main content. It's fine to say I'm water, but at least I'm writing with a purpose. In any case, it's more than 1,000,000 words. I can't just write a chapter over and over every day, right? But if I continue to cut it, then I really won't have a daily routine. After all, I can't have my cake and eat it too. This is all I can do. Please remember the domain name of this book. .com. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 465. This man who had appeared out of nowhere was obviously Qin Shi. Huaxia was about 12,000 kilometers away from the United States. It would take about 20 hours to get there by civilian airliner. That sounded very far away? But with Qin Shi's current level of cultivation, that distance was nothing. In his words, he could just walk out the door and take a turn to get there. The so-called true meaning of the word, void, included the concept of space. Therefore, it also made space jumping a method of travel that could be controlled by immortal cultivators. This was a qualitative change. It also marked that cultivators had officially stepped into the third stage from the second stage. And this third stage was understanding and using the laws of heaven and earth. Compared to Ji, Chenghua's reaction was much slower. Qin Shi had appeared right under their noses. Chenghua didn't understand the crux of the matter. Instead, he stared blankly at the person in front of him. Chenghua, we can't stay here for long. I'll hold him back. You go and activate the cloud-piercing shuttle. Hurry. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Iji immediately used his best move. At the same time, he pushed Chenghua far away. At this time, Chenghua seemed to have just woken up. He finally understood that the cultivation of the person in front of him was definitely far above theirs. Otherwise, how could they not have known when this person had arrived? The heavenly Luo umbrella covered the ruins of the town. From afar, it looked like a black umbrella had been placed on a pile of building models. This was an 8th-grade spirit artifact, the heavenly Luo umbrella. Although the grade of this magic weapon was 1 grade lower than that of Xianghua's Phoenix Perch Scorchtail box, its actual power was slightly stronger than that of the box. After all, it was a complete artifact. It wasn't a combined artifact like the Phoenix Perch Chartail box. Naturally, it was easier to use. Although the two of them usually bickered, the boat of friendship could capsize easily. When they were in real danger, he didn't hesitate at all. He immediately shielded Chenghua behind him and used all his strength to cover his retreat. This mysterious man in front of him was too scary. This was because Iji couldn't sense any trace of true qi fluctuations from him. What did this mean? This meant that this person's cultivation level had reached perfection. He wasn't someone the two of them could deal with. And this was clearly the true danger hidden in the Tianshu ruins. At that moment, many thoughts flashed through Iji's mind. He regretted not stopping Chenghua. But as soon as this thought appeared in his mind, Yi felt a black shadow flash in front of him. And then, his buttocks were ruthlessly kicked by someone. Who told you to be disobedient? Who told you to be unscrupulous? Since your parents didn't educate you properly, Uncle will educate you on behalf of your parents today. He was a golden core cultivator, but now he was like a child who had made a big mistake and was being punished by his parents. Qin Shi kicked Iji far away. You! Iji was stunned. He endured the pain from his butt and looked down at the Tianluo umbrella. Then he pointed at Qin Shi and exclaimed as if he had seen a ghost, "How did you escape?" Once the Tianluo umbrella was opened, nothing could escape. Right now, the heavenly Luo umbrella was perfectly fine above the ruins, but Qin Shi suddenly appeared behind him like a ghost. How could Iji not be shocked? Qi refining, foundation establishment, golden core, Yuanying, soul formation, Dongshu. From golden core to Dongshu, there were several big realms between. Therefore, in Qin Shi's eyes, Chenghua and Iji were two naughty kids who hadn't even grown their hair yet. The two of them were not old, about 15 or 16 years old. Cultivators had the ability to slow down aging and retain their youth, but this was also based on a solid foundation of cultivation. Therefore, it was obvious that their background was not simple. In order to facilitate the interrogation later, Chen Shi did not kill them directly. Instead, he used a more gentle way of physical punishment. But the young man was very proud. How could he be willing to endure such humiliation? When Chen Shi kicked Yiji's but for the third time, Yiji could not help but explode. "Damn it! You deserve to die!" With a loud shout, he, who had always been elegant and cautious, was now like a mad bull, fiercely charging at Chen Shi. Yiji's courage was commendable, but unfortunately, anger could not solve any problems. Seeing Yiji's expression of wanting to eat him alive, Chen Shi could not help but laugh coldly. Yiji's speed, which he was so proud of, was as slow as a turtle in Chen Shi's eyes. Therefore, when Yiji aggressively rushed in front of Chen Shi did not care what move he used. He raised his hand and slapped him. Pa! With one slap, Yiji was slapped until the sky turned dark and he saw stars. Like a spinning top that was whipped, Yiji quickly spun a few rounds in the air before falling heavily. "Kid, Uncle will give you a word of advice today. A young man who has achieved success should not be arrogant. You still have a long way to go." As he spoke, Chen Shi looked back at Cheng Hua, who had already flown far away. Naughty children had to be educated one by one. His sister-in-law was seriously injured, so Chen Shi naturally would not let the two of them go so easily. Now that Yiji had fallen to the ground and could not get up, where could Cheng Hua run to? Thinking of this, Chen Shi could not help but smile. He straightened his fingers and pointed his sword at Cheng Hua. However, just as he was about to shoot out the sword light, Cheng Hua suddenly let out a fierce howl. Immediately after, a strange-looking ship with a dragon head at the bow and a phoenix tail at the stern appeared out of thin air above the town. This time, it was Chen Shi's turn to be stunned. He did not put these two naughty children in his eyes at all. So after coming here, he was too lazy to use his divine sense to carefully scan the surroundings. Who would have thought? How could there be such a strange ship hidden right under his nose? Xingcha. Xingcha was an essential item for cultivators to travel the starry sky. Due to its size and use, Xingcha had already surpassed the category of ordinary magic treasures. This item was extremely rare. On one hand, it required too many materials. On the other hand, it required at least the cultivation of the Dongshu stage to refine Xingcha. Just the latter point alone meant that Xingcha was destined to be precious. Chen Shi knew what was good for him. Thus, the moment he saw the cloud-piercing shuttle appear, he seemed to have suddenly thought of something. He could not help but look at Yiji with an astonished expression and hurriedly asked, "You too are not from Earth?" Chen Shi was somewhat bewildered, but Cheng Hua was not idle. After climbing onto the cloud-piercing shuttle, Cheng Hua directly slapped a spirit stone on the control panel. Then he turned the ship around and rushed towards Yiji. "Yiji, let's go. Please remember the domain name of this book. .com. Wonderful Book House. Com." Chapter 466. It was no wonder that Chen Shi would be surprised. After all, this was a Xingcha. This item was a must-have item for cultivators when traveling or killing people. Based on Earth's current situation, it was obviously impossible to produce such a high-end item like Xingcha. Could it be an antique left behind from the ancient times? Chen Shi carefully observed the Xingcha in front of him and realized that its condition was extremely good. From the outside, there was almost no wear and tear. If he were to use the jargon of the second-hand car market to describe it, then this Xingcha was obviously a new car. It was impossible for it to be an antique that had been buried in the soil for tens of thousands of years. After eliminating this possibility, the problem was naturally simple. This Xingcha in front of him, either it came from Tiandu or it came from the distant outer space. The former was almost impossible because Tiandu had already been destroyed by Chen Shi. Yuan Tianzuan and his family were still watching the stars on Saturn's ring. Thus, there was only one last possibility left. However, in that instant, countless thoughts flashed through Chen Shi's mind. Taking advantage of Qin Shi's momentary daze, Changhua drove the cloud-piercing shuttle and directly caught Yiji from below. Then, they flew into the distance like a wisp of smoke. This set of actions could be said to be like moving clouds and flowing water. The overall coordination could be said to be flawless. Just like that, the two of them put on an extremely gorgeous performance of running for their lives right under Qin Shi's nose. The moment Yiji boarded the ship, the cloud-piercing shuttle's speed was instantly pushed to the limit by Changhua. If it wasn't for the fact that the mid-grade spirit stone couldn't support the cloud-piercing shuttle's space jump, Changhua would probably have escaped to the moon by now. When the cloud-piercing shuttle rushed out of the stratosphere, the two of them instantly widened their field of vision. Only then did Changhua look at Yiji silently with a look of lingering fear. Perhaps it was because they were lucky enough to escape death, but now, the two of them seemed to be in a somewhat depressed mood. Neither of them had the intention to speak. The two of them stared at each other in silence. After a long while, Yiji felt that the atmosphere was a little strange, so he couldn't help but break the silence. "The two of us are lucky to be able to escape this time." Yiji's tone was filled with relief. When Changhua heard this, he was like an eggplant that had been hit by frost. His hands gripped the rudder tightly, and he remained silent. Even though he wasn't the one getting beaten up. However, the image of Qin Shi toying with Yiji was still like a nightmare that lingered in his heart and did not subside for a long time. That man was really too scary. He could actually pinch Yiji in his hand and play with him as he pleased. From this, it could be seen how high this person's cultivation was. This matter had completely exceeded the scope of Chenghua's imagination, so much so that he didn't even dare to think about it any further. After all, young people had always been impulsive. Usually, they would only realize fear after killing someone. Changhua was in such a situation now. When he thought about his rash actions, Changhua felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over his head. He only felt a chill run down his spine. He blamed himself for his ignorance and recklessness. When Yiji saw this, he didn't reprimand him. Instead, he pretended to be relaxed and comforted him. "Haven't we already escaped? What are you still afraid of? Don't worry, I still have a high-grade spirit stone here. Even if that person wants to chase us, he definitely won't be able to catch up to us." As he spoke, Yi took out the high-grade spirit stone that he had kept for a long time. He raised the spirit stone, indicating that Changhua didn't need to worry. However, at this moment, an extremely abrupt voice suddenly rang out from the cloud-piercing shuttle. "Is that so?" The moment he heard this voice, the smile on Yiji's face froze. He turned his head stiffly. Following the direction of the voice, he saw the weird uncle who always hit people's buttocks. At this moment, wasn't he standing proudly at the stern of the shuttle with a faint smile on his face? You what? Call me uncle." Qin Shi rudely interrupted Yiji's words. However, he didn't give Yiji a chance to speak again. With a light wave of his sleeve, he directly pressed the two youths who were about to fight onto the deck of the shuttle. "That's enough, stop struggling. The two of you have been captured by me." Qin Shi's appearance also officially announced that the two youths' escape plan had failed. Then, the cloud-piercing shuttle turned around and headed back to Earth. Unlike when they first arrived, the two youths on the shuttle were now like two roosters who had lost a fight. They lowered their heads and obediently knelt in front of Qin Shi. Looking at how defeated they were now, they probably wouldn't be able to be proud in the future. Xinyuan Changhua, Dongfang Yiji, right? After a series of torture with spanking as the main punishment, Qin Shi successfully got the names of the two youths. Both of them had two surnames. One was Xinyuan, and the other was Dongfang. It sounded like it had a special charm. "Okay, now that I know your names, tell me more about the Supreme Palace enclosure." Qin Shi used to be so focused on returning to Earth that he didn't notice at all. There was a place called the Supreme Palace enclosure at the edge of the solar system. Therefore, when Qin Shi heard this name from Yiji, his interest was instantly piqued. Supreme Palace enclosure? What kind of place was that? Since the Supreme Palace enclosure was at the edge of the solar system, why didn't other cultivators come to Earth before? Qin Shi was a little confused. Therefore, he pondered this question while waiting for the two to answer. However, what he didn't expect was, After hearing his question, Chung Hua and Yi immediately looked at each other. Neither of them had any intention of answering. I'm asking you a question. Seeing this, Qin Shi didn't hold back. He lifted his leg and gave both of them a kick in the buttocks. One look and one could tell that the two of them were very proud people. People with such personalities were usually amenable to coaxing but not coercion. But regrettably, they just had to meet Qin Shi today. What kind of personality did Qin Shi have? What a coincidence! It just so happened that he was also amenable to coaxing but not coercion. Qin Shi didn't waste any time talking nonsense with them. Not going to speak, right? Then I'll kick you until you speak. Bang! 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 Muffled sounds could be heard from the cloud-piercing shuttle. Qin Shi kicked them one after another. Luckily, their cultivation levels weren't low. Otherwise, their flesh would have been torn apart by Qin Shi's kicks. Of course, to these two unlucky kids, being beaten up was a small matter. Being humiliated was a big deal. The two of them had never been humiliated like this since they were young. Therefore, after being kicked by Qin Shi more than 10 times, Chung Hua finally stopped cowering like a quail. He straightened his neck and shouted angrily, "Don't blame me for not warning you. I Xinyuan Chung Hua, swear right here and now. If you kick my buttocks one more time, I will definitely cut you into 1,000 pieces." Hearing this, Qin Shi couldn't help but laugh. He laughed as he walked in front of Chung Hua. He reached out and patted Chung Hua's cheek. Then he asked jokingly, "Are you angry?" Chung Hua didn't say anything. He wanted to spit at Qin Shi, but he was trapped by Qin Shi's true yuan. Other than answering the question honestly, he couldn't do anything else. "If you're angry, then hit me. You even swore that you would cut me into 1,000 pieces. Ha, little guy, are you a clown sent by the monkeys?" At this moment, Qin Shi no longer had the demeanor of an expert. He laughed proudly, and his words were full of ridicule and mockery. When had Chung Hua ever been humiliated like this? As a result, this young man, who had always wanted to compete with the saints of the all heavens, broke down on the spot. The rims of his eyes turned red, and in front of Qin Shi and Yi, tears silently fell from his eyes. Chapter 467. You're crying? Seeing Chung Hua suddenly cry, Qin Shi couldn't help but sigh in his heart. The psychological quality of young people these days was really bad. That's enough. What's a man like you crying for? Someone like you still dares to go around and do evil? It would have been better if Qin Shi hadn't said that. Now that he did, Chung Hua's tears were like flood waters that had been opened. He couldn't stop them. While Chung Hua was crying like a girl, Yiji's eyes were darting around non-stop. He saw that Qin Shi didn't seem to have any intention of harming their lives, so he mustered up his courage and begged for mercy. "Sir, we know our mistakes. Sir, please be magnanimous. Can you let us go today? I promise. We definitely won't barge into the Tianshu ruins again." Tianshu ruins? Qin Shi softly repeated this name. Then, he flicked his sleeves and turned to walk to the helm of the ship. "You've caused such a huge mess, and you still want to leave? I can ignore the grudges between you and the United States, but, do you know who the woman you injured is?" Hearing this, Yiji's heart skipped a beat. Then he asked anxiously, "Who?" "She's my sister-in-law." After saying that, Qin Shi didn't give Yiji a chance to explain. He directly used his inner energy to lift the two of them off the cloud-piercing shuttle. The cloud-piercing shuttle had already returned to the ruins of the small town. When Qin Shi had arrived, he had already helped Qin Xueqing suppress her injuries. So, in the time it took for them to return, Qin Xueqing had already shakily stood up from the ground. It had to be said that her sister-in-law's current appearance was quite pitiful. What she was wearing was just the most common training suit. It was neither a defensive magical equipment nor a high-tech cloth that could not be torn or broken. Therefore, after being bombarded by Chung Hua at such close range, Qin Xueqing's training clothes were only left with a few rags. Blood continuously gushed out from the hideous wound. The dark red blood splattered on her snow-white skin, like plum blossoms blooming at the peak of a snowy mountain. Fortunately, the phoenix perch scorched tail box had exploded behind her, leaving her with a few pieces of cloth to cover up her embarrassment. But even so, his sister-in-law had exposed herself today. As for whether or not she had peeked at him when she came, only the heavens would know. Do you have any healing elixirs? Give it to me. She didn't stand on ceremony with these two brats. Although he told them to take it themselves, in reality, he directly took out a summer mustard pouch from each of them. Seeing this, Iji couldn't help but open his mouth, intending to take the initiative to take medicine for Shi in exchange for better treatment as a captive. Who would have thought? Before he could open his mouth, Shi casually tore open his summer mustard pouch as if it were a plastic bag, tore it open. After seeing this scene, not only Iji, but even Chonghua, who had tears in the corner of his eyes, couldn't help but open his eyes wide. It must be known that the sumar mustard pouch was a magical equipment that could only be used after the owner had dripped a drop of blood on it. If the owner of the magical equipment didn't do it himself, then the bloodline imprint on it had to be erased through refining before the sumar mustard pouch could be successfully opened. But now, Shi opened their sumar mustard pouches so easily in front of them, then lowered his head and started rummaging through them. This time, Iji was really frightened. After stuttering 3 times in a row, he still couldn't squeeze out a complete sentence. You what? Call me uncle. She glared at him, then ignored these two unlucky brats. After taking out a faintly glowing elixir from the summer mustard pouch, he walked straight to Qin Shueqing. Qin Shueqing was resting by a broken pillar at this moment. Seeing Shi walking over with the elixir, she didn't stand on ceremony and swallowed it in one gulp. Needless to say, these two brats really had a lot of good stuff on them. The quality of this elixir was pretty good, probably almost a third of the medicinal properties of the adumbra flower. Therefore, after Qin Wanqing took it, her originally pale face immediately became rosy at a speed visible to the naked eye. Thank you. Oh, I haven't seen you for a few days and you've learned to be polite? Shi replied with a smile. After carefully observing her condition, he immediately felt relieved. Her condition was still pretty good. After all, his sister-in-law was at the golden core stage. As long as her golden core wasn't broken, her physical injuries would naturally heal after a period of time. Shi started to help his sister-in-law recover, while Chonghua and Iji still hadn't recovered from their shock. My father said that only important people who have comprehended the true meaning of the word void can casually tear open the summer mustard pouch. You're actually a paragon? Because they were too shocked, even the usually steady Iji couldn't help but raise his voice when he said this. It sounded like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. It was only now that the two of them finally realized. The man in front of them who didn't have the slightest demeanor of an expert was actually a paragon with unparalleled cultivation? A paragon from the Tianshu ruins? Was there a mistake? The two of them were completely shocked by this sudden conclusion. Thinking about how he had just made a heart demon oath to kill a paragon, Chonghua couldn't help but tear up again. A newborn calf wasn't afraid of a tiger. That was because the calf didn't know how scary a tiger was. Once it realized how scary a tiger was, how could it not be afraid? Looking at the mysterious man in front of him, then looking at the woman who was covered in wounds, a sense of despair instantly spread rapidly in Iji's heart. It's over. This time it's really all because of you. Back to the Aote Nebula. Just as Chonghua and Iji were captured by Qin Shi, a gigantic Xingcha arrived at the place where the two of them had been before. Compared to Chonghua's Xingcha, the Xingcha in front of them was like a cruiser. There were many people standing on the ship. As soon as the Xingcha stopped, a man who was obviously the leader turned around and walked into the cabin. Second, madam, we're here. There was a very beautiful woman sitting in the cabin. She was about 30 or 40 years old, but she didn't look old at all. Furthermore, the unique charm of a mature woman gave her an indescribable and strange charm. The man didn't seem to dare to look at the woman. As soon as he entered the cabin, he quickly lowered his head and silently waited for the woman to speak. However, the woman didn't say anything. She got up and walked to the window. After looking through the window at the densely packed meteorites outside, she suddenly thought of something and couldn't help but ask softly, "This is the place where Huo was last seen?" Second, madam, his. Hearing this, the woman fell silent. After a long time, her voice slowly sounded in the cabin. Silly child. Do you think you can prove that you're stronger than your brother by risking your life like this? Silly, you're really too silly. After hearing the woman's muttering, the man hesitated for a moment before carefully asking in a low voice, Second, madam, why don't I send 2 men of sacrifice in to check it out? Going? The woman seemed to have heard a joke. After chuckling, she waved her hand with a tired face and then muttered in a low voice, No need, since the Tianshu ruins is known as the Heavenly Venerable Forbidden Area, even if you send 2 Heavenly Venerables in, you'll just lose 2 lives in vain. Silly child, it's fine if you don't cherish your own life. As the head of the guards in the family, don't you understand this principle? This subordinate knows his mistake. Alright, I'm tired. Let's go back. Yes. The man quickly walked out of the cabin. At this moment, the woman changed her face like a master of Sichuan opera. Her originally gentle and calm expression suddenly became extremely gloomy and fierce. She glanced coldly outside the window and muttered in a low voice with a gloomy face, Don't worry. If something happens to you, Mother will definitely bury the entire Xianyuan family with you. Chapter 468. After Qin Xueqing recovered a little, Chen Shi was ready to depart with the 2 unlucky kids. However, just as they were about to leave, there was a small episode. The Americans, who didn't even see a shadow during the fight, saw that Qin Shi had settled everything and was ready to leave. They eagerly sent a messenger to negotiate with him. The United States hoped that Qin Shi could hand over Chenghua and Yiji to them. In exchange, the United States were willing to provide Hua Xia with some cutting-edge exoskeleton armor technology. After witnessing the power of the X-Class, how much did the United States want Chenghua and Yiji? They were eager to dissect and study these 2 X-Class soldiers of unknown origin. They were even willing to give up years of research results in exchange. The United States had always been used to taking whatever they wanted. They only treated the world as their backyard. This time, they actually offered enough sincerity in exchange. How could Hua Xia not be tempted? After all, in terms of cutting-edge technology research and development, Hua Xia and the United States were at least 20 years apart. After hearing the instructions from the top, the Wu Lian executives nodded and agreed. But what no one expected was, after the order was passed to Qin Xueqing, Qin Shi only used 1 word to send the messenger away. F***ck off. Qin Shi's attitude was very bad. After the messenger heard this, he was as obedient as a grandson. He didn't even say a word and left on the spot. This kind of behavior really fit the old saying. These days, whoever has the biggest fist has the final say. Without the nuclear bomb as a trump card, the United States couldn't even deal with Chenghua and Yiji. How would they dare to provoke Qin Shi, who easily captured the 2 brats? Therefore, the thousands of American soldiers could only wait obediently at the side and watch as Qin Shi and the others swaggered onto the cloud-piercing shuttle. Fuck. Chink. God damn it. In the battle command center, the colonel in charge of this battle was crazily smashing things. No wonder he was so angry. After all, not only did the target fly away, but the colonel also lost a complete rapid reaction force, causing him to become a commander without an army. No one would be able to swallow such an unlucky thing. However, other than screaming hysterically, what else could he do? Thinking of this, the colonel couldn't help but feel a sense of helplessness. And the appearance of the mysterious man was deeply imprinted in his heart. With Chen Shi's massive energy as the driving force, the cloud-piercing shuttle finally showed Chenghua and Yiji its true speed. In the blink of an eye, the cloud-piercing shuttle brought them back to Shangjing City. Ever since the 2 unlucky brats found out that Qin Shi was at least a supreme martial artist, they behaved extremely obediently. They didn't make a fuss and just quietly knelt on the deck with their heads lowered. Needless to say, this submissive and sorrowful appearance really won the 2 of them the generous treatment of captives. Chen Shi couldn't be bothered to deal with them personally. After temporarily sealing their cultivation, he directly handed them over to Qin Xueqing. Since the injuries on Qin Xueqing's body were caused by the two of them, whether he wanted to kill or torture them, he had to listen to the opinions of the victims first, right? Chen Shi originally thought that with his sister-in-law's temper, she would kill the two of them on the spot to vent her anger. Who would have thought? After Qin Xueqing seriously considered it, she said with a serious face, "My martial cultivation has already reached a bottleneck. Right now, I need to continuously train myself through actual combat in order to successfully break through. Both of their cultivations are pretty good. They're very suitable for practice." After hearing this, Cheng Hua and Yi couldn't help but raise their heads and look at each other. Then, a trace of despair flashed across their eyes. Was she going to use them as human punching bags? It's over. Their future days would probably be worse than death. Qin Xueqing was injured and still needed to rest for a period of time to fully recover. Hence, Chen Shi brought her back to the courtyard and instructed her not to run around before turning to leave. It was now 2:30 in the afternoon. There was still an hour and a half before Nianyan school ended. It was rare that Qin Ruing was in the mood today. Chen Shi originally wanted to accompany Yingying to walk around Summer Palace and cultivate their relationship so that he could climb into her bed as soon as possible. In the end, he was delayed by the two brats. Wasn't it already too late? Chen Shi was very depressed. After finding Qin Ruing through the road sign that he left on her body, he directly rushed towards Qin Ruing's direction. Qin Ruing did indeed go to Summer Palace. But when Qin Shi arrived, she had already left the park and was alone in a taxi. "HM? Where is Yingying going? Didn't we agree to wait for me to come back to find her?" Logically speaking, Qin Ruing would not run around. But Chen Shi stood her up first, so even if Qin Ruing was angry and ran around, it would still make sense. Now that Qin Ruing had already gotten into the car, it was obviously inappropriate for Chen Shi to appear to look for her. Thus, Chen Shi could only follow behind the taxi, wanting to see where Yingying was going. After getting into the car, Qin Ruing sat in the back without saying a word. She quietly looked at the traffic outside the window. Chen Shi secretly flew not far from the taxi, silently looking at the beautiful face that he yearned for day and night. The car continued to move forward in the rolling traffic, but the hustle and bustle of Shangjing City had nothing to do with them. Finally, the car stopped. Chen Shi looked up and realized that Yingying had actually returned to the capital high school. At this moment, there was still half an hour before Nianyan's school day. After Qin Ruing got out of the car, she quietly stood by the side of the road, waiting patiently like many other parents. Yingying is going to pick up Nianyan from school? After seeing this scene, Chen Shi could not help but feel a surge of warmth in his heart. He really did not expect, even if she had lost her memory, even if she did not have his company, Yingying actually knew to pick up Nianyan from school on time. Thinking of this, Chen Shi could no longer hold back the excitement in his heart. He hurriedly deactivated his breath control technique and then pretended to be a normal person. After panicking, he appeared from the corner of the street and ran straight to Qin Ruing's side. "Yingying, I couldn't accompany you to Summer Palace today. I'm sorry." Chen Shi smiled and explained. Hearing this, Qin Ruing silently looked at him, then turned to look at the school building in the distance. Not sure if it was an illusion or not. At that moment, Chen Shi seemed to have seen Qin Ruing lightly nod her head. She seemed to have heard his apology. Chapter 469. Between heaven and earth, life is like a white steed passing by a crack, suddenly. After this matter, Chen Shi and his family's life gradually returned to normal. The long river of time hurriedly passed by. In the blink of an eye, it was the end of the year. Today was February 3rd, the day before New Year's Eve. Although it was not yet a legal holiday, at this time, most of the migrant workers had already returned home. Without the support of the people at the bottom, the big Shangjing suddenly became deserted. There weren't many people in the first place, but today, it was raining and snowing. As the cold wind blew, it gave the capital of the country a bleak feeling. Why was the new year feeling more and more faint? In recent years, housing prices had skyrocketed, so many people had to bear a huge mortgage because of this. People like Chen Shi, who stood at the top of the pyramid and did not need to worry about their lives, were a minority. The general public still had to worry about their livelihood every day. Life was not easy. Even during the New Year holidays, most people hoped to be able to work overtime to earn a sum of money. After all, the New Year overtime pay was high, right? Under such great pressure, how could people show the usual heartfelt smile on their faces? Hohai Ice Rink was deserted, and the bars on the street were basically closed. In the past, they looked forward to the new year. Now, they were enduring the new year. She did not want the little girl to suddenly feel that the new year was the most boring time of the year when she thought about it many years later. Therefore, he used the new year shopping and buying new clothes as an excuse to invite Qin Ruing to go shopping together. Through careful observation during this time, Shi had already figured out Yingying's current style of doing things. She did not care about anything, but she cared about the little girl. Therefore, as long as Shi used the little girl as an excuse and let the little girl act like a spoiled child on the side to assist him, there was a great possibility that he could persuade Qin Ruing to go shopping with him. Although there were not many people on the street, there was a sea of people in the shopping mall. Nian Nian hadn't been as happy as she was today since she started going to primary school. Although the little fellow's IQ was constantly improving, she was still young after all. So when she saw the children's air cushion toys in the middle of the mall, the little fellow couldn't wait to pull Shi and run over there. Although Nian Nian was now the class leader and was incomparably awe-inspiring in class, she was still like an ordinary child in this inflatable castle. Even a simple inflatable slide could be played back and forth several times. The vigorous exercise soon made the little guy sweat profusely. She seemed to be very excited, and a bright smile hung on her rosy cheeks. She smiled and called her to his side. After handing her a bottle of mineral water, the little thing hugged the bottle and gulped it down. Drink slowly. Be careful not to choke. While talking, she stretched out his hand to tidy up the scattered hair on the forehead for the little fellow. The little fellow lay on the edge of the air cushion bed. After rolling her eyes, she set her eyes on Qin Ruing. Qin Ruing stood not far away. Obviously, she was in the downtown area, but she gave people a sense of detachment. To put it bluntly, she was absent-minded. The little fellow was now mischievous. When she saw her mother's idle look, she immediately pouted and said to Shi, "Dad, I don't want to play. It's not fun." "Then what do you want to play? How about Dad take you downstairs to eat?" "No. I want to watch a movie." "Okay, then let's discuss it with Mom." The father and daughter looked at each other. After blinking their eyes, a knowing smile appeared on their faces at the same time. Then, she carried the little fellow out of the air cushion bed, and then came to Qin Ruing's side. He asked in a negotiating tone, "Nian Nian said she wants to watch a movie. How about we take her to see it?" After Shi's voice fell, before Qin Ruing could reply, the little fellow had already pulled on her sleeve and began to act coquettishly. "Mom, I want to watch a movie. Take me to see it, okay?" Hearing this, Qin Ruing looked down at her, and then looked up at Shi, as if to confirm which one of them wanted to watch a movie. Perhaps the little fellow's coquettishness worked. Qin Ruing didn't think for long. She nodded gently and responded, "Let's go. Mom is so nice." The little fellow happily rubbed her head against her hand a few times. Then, she secretly turned her head and stuck out her little tongue at Shi. Looking at this posture, this little fellow seemed to be asking for credit from Shi. Shi took out his phone to look at the recent movies. He found that only White Snake Origins was suitable for a family to watch, so he decisively booked 3 tickets. Before the new year, everyone was busy going home to celebrate the new year. In addition, the New Year's movies were squeezed to be released on the first day of the new year. Therefore, in this huge theater, there were only 2 or 3 audiences sparsely seated. After Shi's family sat down, the little fellow held the popcorn and excitedly twisted it. The last time she watched a movie was last year during the new year, so she couldn't help but be a little excited. Fortunately, there weren't many people in the theater. Otherwise, wouldn't this little fellow disturb the other audiences? Soon, the movie began. Although the little fellow didn't quite understand the plot, the exquisite scenes still left a deep impression on her. The red leaves of Snake Catcher Village were like fire, and the scenery was picturesque. Yongzhou City was brightly lit and full of colorful lights. The moment the white snake revealed its true form, the little fellow couldn't help but let out a cry of surprise. Although the story was still the same old story, after the movie ended, Qinshi didn't immediately get up and leave with his wife and daughter. Instead, he sat in his seat and silently reflected on it. He didn't expect that a random movie would coincidentally hit the soft spot in his heart. The movie might not be very good, but it happened to reflect the viewer's heart. The mountains and rivers are easy to shake. This feeling is like a chisel. 1,000 years in a glance, the love of the previous life. In particular, the sentence, "Thank you, husband," at the end of the Easter egg unintentionally and deeply touched Qinshi. That's right, for real lovers. A mere 500 years. What was the big deal? No matter where he is in the world, no matter what he looks like, no matter whether he remembers me or not, I have to find him, because I remember. This sentence was what Qinshi wanted to say the most. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but turn his head to look at Qin Ruoying next to him. Wasn't the face that had haunted his dreams right in front of him right now? He didn't know why. At that moment, Qinshi suddenly reached out for Qin Ruoying's hand as if at the behest of gods and demons. It was warm and moist. Qinshi was stunned. Because he just realized Ying didn't want to dodge? Qinshi couldn't help but feel a little surprised, so he subconsciously squeezed her soft and boneless hand, as if he wanted to make sure that he wasn't dreaming. There was no doubt that his behavior obviously annoyed Qin Ruoying on the spot. She snorted coldly and immediately stood up from her seat. Then, she carried the confused little fellow and quickly left. "Hey, Ying, wait for me." Qinshi didn't have enough fun, and Qin Ruoying turned hostile. Qinshi had no choice but to put on a bitter face and began to think about how to absolve himself of his rogue behavior. Chapter 470. By the time Qinshi and his family returned home, the originally gray sky was already covered with a layer of darkness. Looking at the situation, it was estimated that the sky would be completely dark before 5 o'clock. The taxi stopped at the entrance of Dongming Alley. As soon as she got out of the car, the little girl couldn't wait to carry her bag and then ran into the alley like a wisp of smoke. She was in a hurry to go home and change into new clothes. "Nian, run slower. Be careful not to fall." Qinshi smiled and reminded her, then went to the back door. With one hand holding the door, he pretended to be a gentleman and bowed to make a "please" gesture. Seeing this, Qin Ruoying acted as if she didn't see him. After getting out of the car from the back, she slightly raised her delicate chin and walked into the alley with a cold face. Needless to say, Ying must still be angry with him at this moment. Qinshi smiled bitterly and shook his head. Then he hung all the bags of New Year's goods on his body and walked into the alley alone. However, the moment he stepped into the alley, the little girl's clear and pleasant voice suddenly sounded from the depths of the alley. "Uncle, who are you looking for?" The little girl blinked her eyes and looked at the uncle in front of her who seemed to be familiar. After looking up and down, she couldn't remember where she had seen him before. "Haha, Uncle specially came today to give you a New Year's greeting. What? We haven't seen each other for only a few months and you don't recognize your uncle?" She was not a peeping Tom, so naturally, it was impossible for him to use his divine sense to observe the surrounding movements at all times. So, when he heard the little girl's voice, he released his divine sense to observe carefully. The visitor who was called uncle by the little girl, it was actually Jiang Yan who hadn't shown up for a long time. Like Qinshi, Jiang Yan was also carrying bags of various sizes. However, the bags in his hands were not as exquisite as the ones in Qinshi's hands. However, it was also these seemingly ordinary woven bags that faintly emitted an indescribable and peculiar fragrance. The little guy smelled the fragrance in the bag, so he couldn't help but poke his head in, as if he wanted to know what was inside. "Nian, look, Uncle brought you a lot of good things today." As he spoke, Jiang Yan bent over and opened the bag. He took out a luminous pearl the size of an adult's fist and handed it to the little guy. "Wow, so beautiful." This luminous pearl was slightly different from ordinary luminous pearls. Its light was not the common blue and green, but an extremely rare milky white. The little guy held the night luminescent pearl in front of his eyes. After looking at it carefully, as if he had found a treasure, he ran excitedly to Qin Ruing's side and held the night-luminescent pearl up high as if he was presenting a treasure. "Mom, look, it's a night-luminescent pearl." The little fellow loved this luminous pearl so much that he couldn't bear to part with it. Seeing this, Qin Ruing looked at Jiang Yan cautiously. She didn't know Jiang Yan. However, her instincts told her, the person in front of her was not a good person. Therefore, Qin Ruing took a step forward without leaving a trace and shielded the little fellow behind her. How smart was Jiang Yan? After seeing Qin Ruing's vigilant action, he immediately smiled and took a few steps back, indicating that he definitely didn't have any ill intentions. You wouldn't know if you didn't compare, but you would be shocked once you compared. Qin Ruing's attitude towards Qin Shi was already bad enough, right? However, to a stranger like Jiang Yan, it was even worse. She didn't even bother to look at Jiang Yan. She hugged the little guy and walked into the courtyard. Luckily, just as Jiang Yan was feeling awkward, the person in question appeared. "Oh, where's the rare guest?" Just like a cook who had just returned home from grocery shopping, Qin Shi glanced at the woven bag beside Jiang Yan and said to Jiang Yan casually, "What's the matter? Let's talk inside." Just like neighbors greeting each other, Qin Shi casually greeted Jiang Yan and turned to enter the house. He didn't stand on ceremony at all. However, Jiang Yan felt uncomfortable. They hadn't seen each other for half a year, but this old man acted as if he didn't know Qin Shi. Jiang Yan timidly wanted to follow him, but just as he took a step, he suddenly retracted his leg as if he had been electrocuted. Qin Shi noticed that something was wrong with him, so he turned around and asked, "What's wrong?" Hearing this, Jiang Yan quickly squeezed out a smile and said with a forced smile, "Nothing, I just came to give you a New Year's greeting. Looking at your wife, she seems to have just woken up? If that's the case, I won't disturb you. These are all gifts I brought from Daiyu Island. They're just some cheap local specialties. I hope you can accept them as a token of my sincerity. I wish you a happy new year in advance." Qin Shi and Jiang Yan were considered acquaintances, so he always felt that Jiang Yan's behavior today was a little strange. However, he couldn't pinpoint exactly what was strange, but he vaguely felt that Jiang Yan seemed to be a little afraid of him. "Okay, I'll accept these things. If you don't come in and have a seat, then I won't keep you. Go ahead and do your thing." Qin Shi didn't stand on ceremony with him. After waving his hand and sending all the local specialties brought by Jiang Yan to the courtyard with his true essence, he turned around and walked into the courtyard. Qin Shi entered the house. After the door was gently closed, a strange expression suddenly appeared on Jiang Yan's face. Jiang Yan looked deeply at the door in front of him as if there was still a lingering fear in his heart. After that, he quickly walked out of the alley without batting an eyelid. It was the same as last time. After Jiang Yan walked out of the main street, Jiang Jingqing's figure suddenly appeared in front of him. However, it was different from last time. This time, before Jiang Jingqing could speak, Jiang Yan grabbed his arm and dragged him forward quickly. "What's wrong?" Jiang Jingqing was a little confused. Just as he was about to ask, Jiang Yan growled and stopped him. "Shut up, let's go." After saying that, Jiang Yan waved his sleeves and directly pulled Jiang Jingqing away from Shang Jing as fast as he could. Jiang Yan dragged Jiang Jingqing along for half an hour before finally coming to a stop. After that, Jiang Yan said to Jiang Jingqing in a very serious tone, "I saw him." "Oh, what's the situation with him now?" "If it weren't for the news from the United States, I'm afraid we wouldn't even know that he's back." At this point, Jiang Jingqing seemed to have thought of something and couldn't help but mutter in confusion. The news from Celestial Capital said that he fought with the 3 Celestial Venerables on Dragon Head Peak. Although he was severely injured, he was lucky enough to escape? Logically speaking, it's easier to go to heaven than to go to hell. If he didn't obtain the Soul Mirror, why would he suddenly return to Earth? The 9 Serenities information was passed down from Celestial Capital, so they were very clear about the situation when Qin Shi and Yuhuan Tianzuan first fought. While Jiang Yan induced Qin Shi to become enemies with Celestial Capital, he also led people to intercept and kill Wushu. Wasn't his goal to incite a war between Qin Shi and Celestial Capital? He had achieved his goal. But what Jiang Yan didn't expect, even in his dreams, what happened next was completely beyond the scope of his imagination. When Qin Shi fought with Yuhuan Tianzuan for the second time, not only did he capture the 10 celestial venerables in one fell swoop, but he also took the entire great world with him. The once glorious celestial capital, wasn't it just like a pile of mud that had been casually thrown into Saturn's ring? The 9 serenities had no way of knowing all of this. However, although Jiang Yan didn't know what happened after that, the moment he saw Qin Shi again, he already knew Mr. Chen was no longer in existence that the 9 serenities could afford to provoke. Perhaps this was just his intuition. But Jiang Yan was willing to trust his intuition for once. Therefore, he didn't care what Jiang Jingqing was muttering and directly ordered in an irrefutable tone. In the name of the leader of the 9 serenities, pass down this order. As long as Mr. Chen is still in Huaxia, all members of the 9 serenities are prohibited from setting foot on Huaxia. If there are any violators, kill without mercy. Chapter 471. As for Jiang Yan's visit, Qin Shi didn't take it to heart. Although he still had some doubts about Jiang Yan's performance today, if he were to secretly follow him and find out what Jiang Yan was up to through tracking, monitoring, eavesdropping, and other means, wouldn't that be giving Jiang Yan too much credit? Qin Shi wasn't that bored. After all, no matter how shrewd Jiang Yan was. For the current Qin Shi, Jiang Yan was just an ant that needed a little effort to crush. No matter how strong an ant was, it was still an ant. The difference between a high-level cultivator and a middle-level cultivator was vividly displayed here. The two couldn't be described in the same sentence. If it were to be described in the words of a scientist, then Qin Shi and Jiang Yan were obviously not living in the same dimension. The essence of cultivation was evolution. Through continuous cultivation, even the weakest mortal might have a day where he could grasp the sun, moon, and stars. Back to Qin Shi's side. When he returned to the courtyard with big and small bags, an extremely strong true essence fluctuation suddenly came from the courtyard. Qin Shi looked up. Wasn't it his sister-in-law who was driving Xingcha back? Qin Xueqing's injuries had already healed. Following her recovery, Cheng Hua and Yi also ushered in the darkest period of their lives. His sister-in-law was very stubborn. She clearly had a perfect cultivation method, but she just didn't use it. Instead, she only cared about exploring and studying it every day, hoping to use her own strength to open up a path of martial arts that belonged to her. This was a brand new path. At the same time, it was also a bumpy road full of thorns. Therefore, Qin Xueqing, in addition to constantly cultivating and accumulating true essence every day, also needed to test the results of her cultivation through a lot of actual combat. As for the actual combat opponents, weren't they the 2 brats who had been down on their luck for 8 lifetimes? The 4-way courtyard couldn't be used, so the sister-in-law would take the 2 brats out on a Xingcha every day. Once they arrived at a remote and inaccessible place, she would have a good spar with them. Of course, rather than calling it a spar, it would be more accurate to call it a one-sided trampling. It should be known that Cheng Hua and Yi's summer mustard seed bags had already been confiscated by Qin Shi. Without the help of their magic treasures, how could the 2 of them be a match for Qin Xueqing by relying only on the 5 elements magic and some superficial martial arts? Qin Shi was a little worried before. He was afraid that his sister-in-law would be held hostage by the 2 of them, so he secretly followed them to observe. Who would have thought? The moment the sister-in-law came up, she started a series of smooth close-range combat, beating the 2 of them on the spot until they cried for their parents. It wasn't that Cheng Hua and Yi hadn't planned to escape, but once they thought about the fact that behind Qin Xueqing stood a supreme martial artist like Qin Shi, the 2 of them suddenly felt that their legs couldn't exert any strength. They couldn't beat her, and they couldn't run. What else could they do? They could only be beaten up every day. Fortunately, the 2 of them were young, strong, and had good foundations. Otherwise, wouldn't they have been torn apart by Qin Xueqing? The cloud-piercing shuttle stopped right above the courtyard. For this reason, Qin Shi had specially set up a large-scale concealment array. After getting off the shuttle, Qin Xueqing went straight to the east wing. After that, Cheng Hua and Yi were like seriously ill patients. After helping each other off the shuttle, the two of them obediently walked to the rear wing. The main entrance of the courtyard was one gate, and the Chuehua gate was the second gate. As captives, the two of them naturally didn't have the right to step into the Chuehua gate. Now that they were able to stay in the rear wing, it was already considered a favor from Chen Shi. "Hey, the two of you, come over here for a moment." Chen Shi was sorting through the packages in the courtyard. When he saw Cheng Hua and Yiji return, he immediately called out to them. Cheng Hua had just been beaten up, so he was naturally in a bad mood. Thus, he pretended not to hear him and walked to the rear wing. Seeing this, Yi grabbed Cheng Hua and quickly squeezed out a smile. He turned around and replied, "Mr. Chen, what can I do for you?" After spending some time together, Yiji had a better understanding of Chen Shi's temperament. It was different from what he had imagined. Chen Shi usually didn't put on any airs. If he hadn't seen Chen Shi's ability before, Yiji wouldn't have believed it at all. The man in front of him who was busy taking care of the children and cooking all day was actually a supreme martial artist. What made Yiji feel even more strange was the supreme martial artist had always been elusive in the Supreme Palace enclosure and was comparable to a mythical existence. However, in this strange family, Chen Shi was the easiest to talk to. He was as amiable as the uncle next door, without any dignity or airs. Otherwise, how could Chen Shi tolerate Cheng Hua's attitude in front of him? After the two of them walked to the center of the courtyard with their heads lowered, Chen Shi said to them, "Tomorrow is New Year's Eve. Do you know about New Year's Eve? It's a day for the family to reunite here. It only happens once a year." Yiji didn't understand the customs of Huaxia, so he naturally didn't understand what Chen Shi meant. Thus, he asked carefully, please forgive me for being slow-witted. What do you mean by this?" According to our customs here, no matter what you do outside on New Year's Eve, you should go home for the new year. Hearing that, Yiji couldn't help but be delighted. He hesitated for a moment before suppressing the excitement in his heart and asked with a nervous expression, "Sir, are you letting us go home?" "Go home?" Chen Shi looked at Yiji in surprise. He couldn't help but wonder if this child had been beaten silly by Qin Xueqing. How is that possible? "Even if I agree, Xingqing won't agree. Don't think about going home. Just stay here and practice martial arts with Xingqing. It's good for both of you anyway." At this point, Chen Shi seemed to have suddenly thought of something. He couldn't help but rub his chin and began to wonder if his way of treating the captives was too friendly. Why did it feel like he was educating someone else's child? Forget it. It's rare that we're here for the new year. I'll let both of you enjoy the festivities. I'll go and talk to Xingqing later. She won't beat you for the next 2 days. Both of you can stay at home and have fun with Nian Nian. Just treat it as a holiday so that she won't hurt you. After that, Chen Shi waved his hand, indicating that the two of them could return to the house. The two of them came in confusion and left in confusion. However, before they stepped out of the Chuehua gate, Chen Shi's voice suddenly rang out. "Oh, right, both of you should come for dinner tonight. It's a reunion dinner. The more the merrier." At this moment, Yiji was stunned. Cheng Hua was also stunned. The two of them felt like they had misheard. After looking at each other, they couldn't help but turn to look at Chen Shi. Chen Shi noticed their strange behavior, so he put down the bag in his hand and looked at the two of them with a puzzled expression. The two of them looked at each other across the yard. "What's wrong?" "No, nothing." Then, Yiji acted like a thief who was caught. He pulled Cheng Hua and hurriedly ran back to the back of the house. After the two of them closed the door and set up an almost useless soundproof restriction, Yi said with a complicated expression, "Cheng Hua, I miss home." "Me too. Do you want to go back?" After hearing Yiji's question, Cheng Hua suddenly fell silent. After a long time, he finally replied in a muffled voice, "It's fine if I don't go back." Hearing this, Yiji was not surprised. He laid on the bed and stared at the ceiling in a daze, as if he was thinking about something. "I suddenly feel, even if I'm a prisoner here, it seems like a good choice. I'm afraid that if there are too many blessings tomorrow, you won't care about my greetings. I'm afraid that the firecrackers on the first day will be too noisy, you won't hear my blessings. I'm afraid that the dishes on the second day will be too fragrant, you won't see my messages. Therefore, I chose to send you my blessings today. I wish you a happy new year and all the best. I also wish your family's happiness, health, and wealth. Sichuan Bai is here. I wish you all an early new year. 3. Chapter 472. February 4th, New Year's Eve. This day was always the busiest day in the courtyard. This was Nian Nian's third New Year's Eve in the courtyard. Although last year's New Year's Eve was also very lively, without Chen Shi and Qin Ruing, the house always felt like something was missing. So at that time, the little fellow's heart was inevitably a little empty and chatty. But fortunately, those were all in the past. This year's courtyard was much livelier than the year before. Early in the morning, the little fellow twisted the two brats and insisted that they play hide-and-seek with her in the courtyard. As a result, the two 16 or 17-year-old youths carefully followed behind the 6-year-old child, afraid that she would accidentally fall. Cheng Hua and Yi Ji now understood. Wasn't the one with the highest status in this family the little fellow who looked like a porcelain doll in front of them? Since she was the daughter of the Supreme Being, then when she grew up, wouldn't she be an existence comparable to the divine sons and saintesses? The only thing that made the two of them feel a little strange was that Nian Nian didn't have any signs of spiritual energy fluctuations on her body. If it weren't for the fact that she had several extraordinary treasures on her, perhaps the two of them might even have the idea of holding her hostage because of this. Other people's children tempered their bodies at the age of 1 and built their foundation at the age of 3. However, when it came to Chen Shi, Nian Nian was still like an ordinary child at the age of 6. He couldn't see anything different about her at all. Regarding this, Cheng Hua and Yi Ji could only sigh silently in their hearts. The way the Supreme Being educated children was indeed not something that ordinary people like them could guess. New Year's Eve. It was nothing more than a reunion dinner, fireworks, and watching the Spring Festival Gala. Year after year, there really wasn't anything new to play with, so there was no need to go into detail here. The only thing worth noting was, perhaps it was because Nian Nian was too young, so it was indeed difficult for her to get the excitement of the Spring Festival Gala. Therefore, after sitting for a short while, the little thing began to wander around the room, scratching its itch. Cheng Hua and Yi Ji had never watched TV before. Therefore, from the moment the Spring Festival Gala started broadcasting, the two of them never looked away from the television. The more the others watched, the more bored Nian Nian was to watch by the side. Thus, after the little thing rolled her big eyes around, she moved closer to Chen Shi and said coquettishly, "Daddy, I want to watch a movie." As soon as she finished speaking, she pursed her lips and deliberately put on an aggrieved look. Movie? Chen Shi was stunned for a moment. He looked up at the Spring Festival Gala skit that was playing on the TV, and then looked down at the little fellow who was looking forward to it. He thought she wanted to watch cartoons, so he picked up the remote control and asked, "What do you want to watch? Daddy will give you some." However, after the little guy heard his words, he quickly shook his head and muttered unhappily, "I don't want to watch it at home. I want to go to the cinema. Let's watch a big movie." Some time ago, White Snake left a deep impression on the little fellow. He did not expect her to be addicted to watching movies because of it. Today is New Year's Eve. Everyone has gone home for the new year. I don't know if the cinema is open for business. Chen Shi would never refuse the little fellow's request. Therefore, after pinching the little fellow's nose, he smiled and took out his phone to check it out. According to his understanding, at this time, not to mention the cinema, even the barbecue stall would have to go home for the new year. However, what Chen Shi did not expect was, it was the new year, and the cinema was still open. Wandering Earth? Chen Shi looked at the movie schedule and found that many cinemas only had this one movie schedule. He handed the phone to the little fellow and let her decide whether she wanted to watch it or not. "Let's watch this. I want to watch Earth." The little fellow was not shy. After seeing the Earth on the movie poster, she immediately twisted Chen Shi excitedly and shouted loudly. "Okay, let's watch this then." As he spoke, Chen Shi gently patted the little fellow. This was an exclusive secret signal between the father and daughter. After all, in this family, the father did not have the final say. It was the mother's approval that counted. After the little fellow received the order, she immediately went to Qin Ruing's side and then began to act coquettishly with her. "Mom, I want to watch a movie. Take me to the movie, okay?" "Okay." In this regard, Qin Ruing agreed very quickly. Almost without hesitation, she nodded gently. After receiving the official's approval, the family of three set off in the middle of the night. Naturally, Changhua and Yiji accompanied them. Of course, the two of them were not really curious about the movie. The reason why they followed Qin Shi out in a panic was purely to avoid sitting under the same roof as Qin Shueqing. It could be seen that the two of them were traumatized by their sister-in-law. There was not a single soul on the streets, but the movie theater was full of people and was very lively. The audience had great expectations for Wandering Planet, which was known as the sci-fi masterpiece of Huaxia. It had to be said that the Huaxia audience's tolerance was indeed very high. No matter how bad the movie was, as long as a few celebrities were involved, they could earn back the box office no matter what. The audience had long been scared of being deceived, so when they bought tickets, they were a little nervous. They were afraid that they would accidentally fall into the trap of a trashy director. Fortunately, it was not a scam this time. It was finally worth the ticket price. Didn't Changhua and Yiji just pass by Jupiter a while ago? Therefore, when the two of them saw the realistic and spectacular special effects on the big screen, they were immediately shocked by everything in front of them. Yiji, is this the entertainment method of a low-level technological civilization? It seems to be very different from what we imagined. Well, it seems that a low-level technological civilization is not without merit, even if there is no supreme existence like Mr. Chen. With the accumulation of their own civilization, they would probably be able to control the entire Tianshu ruins within 1,000 years. While watching the movie, the two of them secretly communicated with their divine senses. It was only at this time that the two of them could speak freely and say what they were thinking. The two of them only thought that they could use a secret technique to block Qinshi's perception, but they did not think that, since they could use a secret technique to block Qinshi's perception, how could Qinshi not use a secret technique to eavesdrop on their conversation? Supreme Palace Enclosure. Unlike Earth, the Supreme Palace Enclosure was not spherical. Instead, it was a continental plate floating in the universe. At the end of the land was the universe. This was the so-called square sky and square earth. In addition, an existence similar to the Supreme Palace Enclosure was actually very common in the universe. When Qianxi was in the heavenly Jade Realm, he had once been in charge of a sacred cultivation ground similar to the Supreme Palace Enclosure. That was why he was given the title of Divine Lord. Divine Lord Qianxi was the actual ruler of this sacred ground. Therefore, sometimes one only needed to directly judge the level of a sacred ground based on the ruler's title. Sacred cultivation grounds were also divided into good and bad. Among them, the best was naturally a mother planet like the heavenly Jade Realm that could continuously produce spirit chi of heaven and earth. A little lower was the current Earth, which was the Tianshu ruins that Changhua and Yiji spoke of. Next was the Supreme Palace Enclosure. Just like the Great World, the Supreme Palace Enclosure itself was not a planet. Therefore, no matter how prosperous it was now, it would inevitably fall into desolation one day, just like Earth when its spirit chi was exhausted. The day the spirit chi was exhausted was the moment the Supreme Palace Enclosure welcomed the arrival of Doomsday. Of course, this process of exhaustion usually took tens of thousands of years, so there was no need to worry too early. The reason was very simple. After all, no matter how long cultivators lived, how many of them could successfully live for tens of thousands of years? Yesterday was the reunion year, today was the reunion year, and the day after tomorrow was the reunion year. Originally, he wanted to relax for the next few days, but after thinking about it, he still felt that he should not stop updating, so he forced himself to get up and continue writing. In short, I wish everyone a happy new year. Remember to use the tickets if you have them. Monthly tickets, recommendation tickets, rewards, I will not reject any of them. I have never asked for these things. After all, with my current results, even if you vote for me, I won't be able to get on the list. However, it's the new year, so the data should look better, right? It's just for the sake of celebration. Thank you in advance, big shots, moi, 3. Oh right, Wandering Earth is really not bad. There are flaws, but it's still acceptable. After all, this is just the beginning. I used to write science fiction and have always liked watching science fiction movies, so I'm very happy that China can produce such a science fiction movie. If you encounter a troll during the movie who keeps picking on you and saying things that are unscientific and unreasonable to disgust you, then please respond to him decisively. Autobots, transform. Do you believe that I, Thanos, will destroy you with a snap of my fingers? Chapter 473. The movie was pretty good. At least the little girl didn't fall asleep. After watching the movie, she even excitedly twisted around Qin and said, "Daddy, space is so beautiful. When are you going to bring me to pick the stars?" In response, Qin didn't just brush her off. Instead, he told her seriously, when she turned 18, he would definitely fulfill his promise and bring her to pick the stars and the moon in space. Daddy is the best. Could this promise be fulfilled? For the little girl, this wasn't important at all. In reality, she just wanted to hear her father make a promise to her seriously. Every time this happened, her face would naturally reveal a pure smile that could melt a person's heart. She was happy because her father agreed to her request. The little girl was extremely happy, but Changhua and Yiji were like mute people who had eaten Chinese medicine. They felt bitter and frustrated. After all, a good cloud-piercing shuttle was stolen just like that. Anyone would be depressed, right? This movie was 2 hours long, so when Qin and his family left the theater, it was already 2 in the morning. February 5th, early morning. A new year had quietly arrived. The little girl yawned and then laid on Qin's shoulder like a koala bear. She soon fell asleep. Hearing the sound of steady breathing, Qin couldn't help but reveal a faint smile on his face. The wind on the street was very light. It was as if everything was silent. Shangjing, known as the city that never sleeps, finally quieted down. Only the roar of cars could be heard from time to time, telling the passers-by about the city's past glory. This New Year's Eve was still considered perfect and happy. At the beginning of the new year, everything was renewed. After the bustling new year, the little girl started her school life again. Once the child went to school, the parents naturally had more free time. Qin originally planned to go back to his old business, but without a capable manager like Qiao Yuan, he didn't want to waste time and effort running the tea house, so he just closed it. Now, other than sending Yen to and from school every day, Qin didn't have a reason to go out anymore. Therefore, he stayed at home all day thinking about how to win over his wife. Although he said he was trying to win over her, he was actually strolling around with Qin Ruoying every day. Today, they strolled from the west gate to the east gate. Tomorrow, they strolled from the south gate to the north gate. They really went through every nook and cranny of Shangjing. During this time, it wasn't that Qin didn't think about how to retrieve Ying's memories. But the soul mirror was like a dead phone. No matter what Qin did, she couldn't activate it. Qin had no choice but to make a trip to Saturn's ring and conduct a friendly interview with heavenly venerable Yu Huan. Although Tiandu had lost its hometown, it still retained most of its high-end combat power. Therefore, Yuhuan Tianzuan tried to use the secret of the soul mirror as an exchange for better treatment as a captive. One had to know that Saturn didn't have abundant heaven and earth spirit qi. If they were trapped here for a long time, even Yuhuan Tianzuan would end up like a lamp that had run out of oil, let alone a divine general with a lower cultivation. Yuhuan Tianzuan thought that his request wasn't excessive at all, but he didn't expect. He had just made the request, but Qin had flatly refused. Her attitude was very firm, and there was no room for negotiation. Impossible, don't mention this again. As long as I'm here, you'll never be able to return to Earth. Because of this, Yuhuan Tianzuan's face alternated between green and white. If it weren't for the fact that he couldn't beat Qin, he would have already turned hostile and rushed up. Fortunately, Qin was not a homicidal maniac who treated human lives as worthless. Therefore, before Heavenly Venerate Yuhuan could do anything in his desperation, Qin had directly proposed the solution that he had thought of previously. Don't think about Earth, the moon is a good place. You know the moon? It's the moon in the sky. Before I came, I already confirmed that as long as there is a spirit chi tide on Earth, a part of the spirit chi will surge to the moon. Although it's not much, it's enough to maintain your daily cultivation. Yuan Tianzuan was naturally very dissatisfied with Qin Shi's arrangement. But, so what if he was dissatisfied? As the saying went, one had to lower their heads under the eaves. If he really angered Qin Shi, it wouldn't be a problem of whether there was enough spirit chi, but a problem of whether Tiandu could continue to exist. Yuan Tianzuan compromised. Therefore, Qin Shi undid the seal that was previously set, and then led the group of Tiandu people to fly to the moon. At the same time, the Haute Nebula at the edge of the solar system suddenly welcomed a visitor. The visitor was a young girl. She was about 15 or 16 years old, in the prime of her youth, so she looked really pretty. Although the young girl was not old, she was quite brave. She actually dared to drive Xingcha alone to this ancient forbidden area that everyone talked about. Of course, daring to come didn't mean that she was not afraid. Even before she got close to the meteorite belt, the young girl's face was already a little pale from nervousness. Brother Dongfeng, are you there? As if to drive away the fear in her heart, the young girl stood at the bow of the ship and shouted loudly toward the forbidden area. There was no medium to transmit sound in the universe. Therefore, rather than saying that she was shouting, it was better to say that she was constantly instilling vital essence into the forbidden area. The universe was really too big. One had to know that the Haute Nebula was like an eggshell. It included the entire solar system, so how big was its volume? Compared to it, the young girl was so small that she could be ignored. So even if she used the voice transmission secret method, how far could her shout be transmitted? The young girl was extremely scared. She kept shouting, but there was no response from the forbidden area. No, Brother Dongfeng will be fine. After shouting continuously for about 4 to 5 hours, the young girl finally despaired. In fact, from the moment she heard the news, she was already in despair. The reason why she still came here was to use facts to convince herself and to shatter the last trace of fantasy in her heart. Brother Dongfeng, you said you would wait for me to grow up? You said you would marry me, the young girl cried out in despair. Bean-sized teardrops continued to slide down her cheeks, coupled with her beautiful and lovely appearance. The ignorant young girl in front of him gave off a poignant feeling like a pear blossom in the rain. Young people didn't understand love and were always the most infatuated. In fact, it was only at the age when one didn't understand love that one could love someone to death. You said you would marry me. After muttering this sentence a few times, the young girl finally seemed to have made an important decision. She gently wiped away the tears on her face. Then, a bright smile appeared on her face. Brother Dongfeng, I'm coming for you, wait for me. After speaking, the young girl closed her eyes and drove the Xingcha to the Haute Nebula at full speed. Jiutian Divine Emperor. Chapter 474. For the people in the Supreme Palace enclosure, the solar system was the supreme forbidden land in ancient myths and legends. The so-called Forbidden Land was naturally a place that everyone kept a secret and even changed their expressions when talking about it. Even if there was no one guarding it, there were always few people there, so many people might have never been there in their lives. However, although many people had not personally explored the Forbidden Land, if the Forbidden Land was mentioned, they could open their mouths and describe it in more detail than those who had seen it with their own eyes. There was an ancient saying, 3 people make a tiger. Gossip is a fearful thing. This was the terrifying part of rumors. After the exaggerated narration by the busybodies, the Tianshu ruins became synonymous with the horror of today. Especially after a heavenly venerable died in front of everyone's eyes, the various rumors about the Tianshu ruins seemed to have been confirmed. Tianshu ruins. Heavenly venerable forbidden land. Even heavenly venerable level big shots could not step into it, who would complain that their life was too long and insist on breaking into the forbidden land again, unless they did not want to live anymore. Therefore, when this infatuated girl confirmed that her brother Dongfeng had entered the Tianshu ruins, she was so desperate and helpless. Was this love? No. Anyway, there was no reason to be in love. Perhaps when she grew up, she would laugh at her foolishness today, but she would never regret her decision today. After all, she just happened to be at the age of the first awakening of love and met the person she liked. The girl gently closed her eyes. Then, with a calm smile on her face, she drove Xingcha quickly to the meteorite belt not far away. She was even mentally prepared to be smashed into pieces and her soul destroyed in the next moment. But she never thought. She closed her eyes and waited for a long time. When she opened her eyes again, what entered his eyes was not a land of death that was filled with danger and death. Instead, it was a boundless sea of stars that was quiet and peaceful. When one looked up, the stars in the sky were all stars. The universe was very big, and the solar system was very small. There was only one star in the entire solar system, and that was the sun. Because it was too far away, in the eyes of the young lady, the sun was like a star, silently hanging in the pitch-black sky. She turned back to look at the Haute Nebula behind her. The dense comets blocked her view like a natural moat, completely separating the Supreme Palace enclosure from the Dubhe ruins. The girl stood at the bow of the ship and looked around, her eyes filled with disbelief. How could she enter the Tianshu ruins so easily? After a long period of calmness, the girl finally accepted the reality in front of her. Since she was fine, it meant the Tianshu ruins were not as dangerous as the legend said. Perhaps Big Brother Dongfang had already explored it. The girl instinctively wanted to chase after him. However, after thinking about it for a while, she suddenly turned the ship around and rushed back to the Haute Nebula. This place is too big. If I want to rely on my own strength to find Brother Dongfang, this is tantamount to looking for a needle in a haystack. No, I have to bring this news back. Unlike Chenghua's recklessness and greed, the young girl did not care about the final ownership of the Dubhe ruins. Therefore, when she confirmed that the Tianshu ruins were not dangerous, she wanted to bring this news back as soon as possible so that more people could help her find her brother Dongfang. While the girl hurried back to the Supreme Palace enclosure, Chen Shi was not idle either. He arranged the Tiandu group on the dark side of the moon. Therefore, from this moment on, Tiandu was really floating in the sky. The thing to note here was, because while the moon revolved around the Earth, the moon itself was also rotating. In addition, its rotation period was the same as its rotation period, so no matter where you stood on the Earth and looked up at the sky, humans would always only see one side of the moon. As for the other side that could not be seen, it was called the dark side of the moon. In order to prevent Yuhuan Tianzuan from sneaking to the Earth, Chen Shi also set up a large ceiling formation on the dark side of the moon. There were still a lot of high-end combat power in Tiandu. If they combined their strength, they might be able to break this formation by force. However, this place was too close to the Earth. Even if Yuhuan Tianzuan wanted to break the formation by force, Chen Shi could immediately rush over to stop him. Therefore, after setting up the formation, Chen Shi was completely relieved. At this time, Yuhuan Tianzuan seemed to have accepted his fate. Ever since the collapse of the big world, causing Tiandu to be forcibly relocated to the solar system, Yuhuan Tianzuan was like a defeated rooster. He was dejected all day long and was no longer as elegant as before. It stood to reason that a proud person like Yuhuan Tianzuan would not completely lose his fighting spirit because of one failure. Chen Shi guessed that there must be some secret. Therefore, he arranged for the Tiandu group to be on the moon. After fulfilling his promise that he would treat the remnants of Tiandu well, he took the soul mirror and talked to Yuhuan Tianzuan again. Chen Shi was prepared to extort a confession by torture, but he did not expect. Yuhuan Tianzuan was much more straightforward than he thought. Perhaps Chen Shi was overthinking, but in short, he felt that Yuhuan Tianzuan was not too hostile to him now. Instead, he seemed to have a lot to say to him. Mutual appreciation? I'm afraid not. The two flew side by side to a nearby ring-shaped mountaintop. Looking at the sparkling blue planet not far away, Yuhuan Tianzuan's tone was no longer as overbearing as before. Instead, there was an inexplicable sense of desolation. It turned out that, as early as 10,000 years ago, The Tai Ching ancestor left a prophecy that Tiandu would be destroyed one day. At that time, only the soul mirror could ensure that Tiandu's incense would continue to burn and pass down. In this regard, the 10 celestial lords of Tiandu naturally believed in it. It was precisely because of this that when Yuhuan Tianzuan learned that the spiritual qi of the lower realm had begun to recover, he began to plan to build a soul bridge and lead everyone back to Earth. The ancient immortal cultivators were forced to leave Earth, so it was natural for them to return now. Everything should have gone according to plan. Unfortunately, Qin Shi's appearance caused Yuhuan Tianzuan to be forced to activate the Sun-Moon Star Array. And everything that happened afterward completely refreshed his worldview. It wasn't until the moment the 9 stars aligned that Yuhuan Tianzuan suddenly realized things were not as simple as the previous celestial lords had imagined. The Tai Ching ancestor must have hidden some shocking secret. In fact, there weren't many records of the soul mirror and the Sun-Moon Star Array in the ancient books left behind by the great ancestor. Even an outsider like Qin Shi could see the extraordinariness of the Sun-Moon Star Array at a glance. How could the previous celestial lords of Tiandu not see through it? Therefore, the previous celestial lords all thought that the Sun-Moon Star Array was the last life-saving straw that the Tai Ching ancestor had prepared for Tiandu. Who would have thought? The price of activating the array was so painful. Could this be the so-called trump card? Without needing the enemy to make a move, he would first destroy the foundation? During this period of time, Yuhuan Tianzuan had been thinking about why the Tai Ching ancestor would make such an arrangement. Combined with the ancient records that he had read in the Imperial Hall, coupled with his own personal experience, Yuhuan Tianzuan suddenly remembered a terrifying rumor that had been circulating since ancient times. The content of the rumor was actually very simple. That was the reason why the Tai Ching ancestor led the ancient immortal cultivators to the great world to establish Tiandu was not to save the common people from suffering, but to satisfy his own selfish desires. This Tai Ching ancestor, who was regarded as a god by the ancient immortal cultivators, in fact, he was a despicable person who pretended to be righteous. The holiday is over. The new year has begun. I will strive to write more words. At the same time, I wish everyone good luck in the coming year and get promoted and rich as soon as possible. Chapter 475. The divine ancestor had once said that when Tiandu was in danger, the formation could be activated to ensure the continuation of Tiandu's inheritance. Although the Sun-Moon Star formation was very powerful, the most crucial part of it was obviously that seemingly useless Khanate supreme treasure, the sky-bearing mirror of floating dawn. In addition, there were many different opinions about the origin of this Khanate supreme treasure within Tiandu. Some said it was the divine ancestor's natal magic treasure, while others said it was inadvertently found in the depths of the void. As for which was true and which was false, perhaps only the divine ancestor himself knew. Successive celestial venerables had carefully studied the soul mirror, but no one could discover any secrets from it. Over time, this Khanate supreme treasure was completely reduced to a useless decoration. Yuhuan Tianzuan was ambitious and naturally would not easily believe that the soul mirror was useless. From the day he became a celestial venerable, he had been constantly thinking about how to take the soul mirror for his own use. In order to achieve this goal, Yuhuan Tianzuan had even flipped through all the ancient records related to the divine ancestor. In addition to some obviously official biographies, he had even searched for many unofficial histories from the people. Thus, Yuhuan Tianzuan gradually understood some of the secrets of the ancient times. What needed to be mentioned here was that as long as there was political power, there would inevitably be opponents. Tiandu was no exception. The divine ancestor was not a national treasure and could not be liked by everyone, so it was inevitable that there would be some thieves with evil intentions spreading rumors to slander the divine ancestor. It was from these traders that Yuhuan Tianzuan had obtained this unofficial history that was close to a rumor. According to the unofficial records, the divine ancestor was not as glorious and great as people imagined. Instead, he was an out-and-out hypocrite, 10,000 times more disgusting than Mount Hua. History was always written by the victors. 10,000 years had passed, so how much of the past could the people of later generations remember? Wasn't it still just reading the ancient records left behind by the predecessors? In the official history, the divine ancestor's greatness did not need to be repeated, because he had long become a god worshipped by everyone in Tiandu. But in this unofficial history, the image of the grand pure divine ancestor was completely different from what everyone knew before. Even if his cultivation was unparalleled, he still had the heart of 5 poisons that everyone had: greed, anger, stupidity, hesitation, and doubt. It was precisely because of this that the Grand Pure One in the unofficial history was no longer a flawless ancient myth. Instead, he was more like a living person. In fact, whether it was official history or unofficial history, these were all written by people who had come before them. As long as it was recorded by someone, it would definitely have a certain degree of subjectivity. Not to mention, this unofficial history that could be said to be treasonous came from the Jiang clan's ancestor that had long since been listed as a sinner. The ancestors of the Jiang clan had always been enemies of Tiandu, so it was naturally impossible for them to respect the divine ancestor like the common people of Tiandu did. Therefore, Yuhuan Tianzuan originally did not take these fabricated unofficial histories seriously. It was not until the destruction of Tiandu that Yuhuan Tianzuan suddenly woke up. Could it be that the contents of this unofficial history were true? Unofficial history? Show it to me. Hearing this, Chen Shi's gossipy soul couldn't help but burn up. Just like how modern people were always full of curiosity about ancient emperors. Such a stunning figure like the Grand Pure One would naturally make Chen Shi yearn for him. He couldn't help but want to learn more from the mouths of others. After hearing Chen Shi's words, Yuhuan Tianzuan hesitated. After all, he was the head of the 10 celestial venerables and the current actual ruler of Tiandu. Wasn't the act of slandering the divine ancestor the same as smearing feces on him? Could it be that he had to praise, well smeared, so fragrant? Hurry up, what are you dawdling for? Just show it to me. I'm not a person of Tiandu. Are you afraid that I'll rebel after seeing it? Seeing that Yuhuan Tianzuan was somewhat hesitant, Chen Shi kept urging him. There was no other way. Yuhuan Tianzuan really couldn't persuade Chen Shi. He could only take out a palm-sized jade slip from his mustard seed bag with a hesitant expression. The so-called jade slip was the carrier that cultivators used to record important information. The content was neither words nor sound, but consciousness. Chen Shi snatched the jade slip from Yuhuan Tianzuan's hand and poured his divine sense into it. The information recorded in the jade slip immediately poured into his mind. Interesting. After silently digesting the information in the jade slip, the corners of Chen Shi's mouth couldn't help but reveal a faint smile. Just as Yuhuan Tianzuan said, the information in the jade slip was filled with a large amount of slandering of the Grand Pure One sacred ancestor. However, after excluding these slanderous words, the most important information was actually about the ancestor of the Jiang clan. Although the Jiang clan was very weak now, in ancient times, the ancestor of the Jiang clan and the Grand Pure One sacred ancestor were fellow disciples. The Grand Pure One sacred ancestor was so amazing. As his junior brother, how weak could the ancestor of the Jiang clan be? This, even Jiang Yan didn't know much about. The name of the sect that the Grand Pure One sacred ancestor belonged to was no longer known, but there was no doubt that the earth of that era was indeed very powerful, far surpassing the current Tianxian. Of course, the earth at that time wasn't called Earth, but was called Dubhe Realm. In short, it was an era where heroes came forth in large numbers. If it wasn't for the sudden depletion of the spirit chi of heaven and earth, there probably wouldn't be any modern humans. Logically speaking, since the ancestor of the Jiang clan and the Grand Pure One sacred ancestor were fellow disciples, how could his descendants be labeled as sinners by the sacred ancestor? There must be some secret hidden within, but this jade slip didn't record it in detail. Other than some meaningless slander, Chen Shi couldn't find a single useful piece of information. This kind of feeling was like someone exposing a celebrity's scandals on the internet. No matter what the rumor-mongers said, how could they convince people without concrete evidence? Chen Shi held the jade slip in his hand and rubbed it carefully, as if he was thinking about something. One had to know that jade slips had always been used to record important information. How could they only record some baseless slander? In the words of the netizens, that was, how could there be no real evidence? Thinking of this, Chen Shi couldn't help but pour his divine sense into the jade slip again and try to find some useful information from it. This time he looked very carefully. He carefully studied the jade slip from the inside to the outside. And it was precisely because of this that Chen Shi actually managed to find a seal in this seemingly ordinary jade slip. This seal was very strange. It actually contained some of the true meaning of the word void, so that others couldn't discover its existence at all. In other words, only cultivators at the Dongshu realm could successfully read its contents. Yuhuan Tianzuan's cultivation was only at the mid-deity transformation stage, so even if the jade slip had been in his hands all this time, he didn't know that there were other contents hidden in the jade slip. Therefore, the moment Chen Shi discovered this seal, he already realized what he was about to uncover could be a shocking secret that had been covered in dust for tens of thousands of years. Chapter 476. The information in the jade slip was transmitted through consciousness. Therefore, from Chen Shi unlocking the seal to him knowing all the contents in it, all this happened in the blink of an eye. Although Yuhuan Tianzuan's cultivation couldn't be compared with Chen Shi's. But at that moment, he was still keenly aware of a slight expression change on Chen Shi's face. What's wrong? One had to know that Yuhuan Tianzuan was not an easy person to deal with. So, this old guy immediately pretended to be concerned and asked, "Did you find any problems?" "Nothing, I just feel that the empty slander above is a bit funny." Heavenly Venerate Yuhuan tried to discover something from Chen Shi's face, but Chen Shi merely smiled and shook his head. Then, he pretended to be at ease and threw the jade slip back to Heavenly Venerate Yuhuan. After Yuhuan Tianzuan took the jade slip, he quickly checked it with his divine thought. After confirming that there was nothing strange in it, he was slightly relieved. "Okay, that's it for today. I have to go back and pick up the children from school. You stay here and preside over the reconstruction work of Tiandu. If you guys perform well, maybe I'll consider accepting your immigration application. But before that, you all stay here obediently. You are not allowed to go anywhere. Once I find out that you are trying to escape from here, I think you should be very clear about the consequences." After Chen Shi gave a series of orders in a bureaucratic tone, the expression on Emperor Yuhuan's face was marvelous. "Are you really treating us as captives?" Yuhuan Tianzuan cursed in his heart. But due to Chen Shi's abuse of power, he could only snort softly and vent the dissatisfaction in his heart. Chen Shi left the moon. But he did not immediately return to the courtyard, but flew aimlessly outside the atmosphere, looking at the boundless starry sky while silently sorting out the information he got from the jade slip. The information in the jade slip could be divided into two parts. On the surface, the content was to insult the Grand Pure One and slander him. The content hidden under the seal was a complete description of what had happened in the past from the perspective of a bystander. There was too much information in the jade slip. In addition, the person who left the jade slip didn't have a very firm position, so Chen Shi could only sort it out bit by bit. First of all, it could be concluded that the contents of the two sections were not left by the same person. Chen Shi guessed that it was very likely that the true owner of the jade slip was a descendant of the Jiang clan's ancestor, or even a close relative within 3 generations. In other words, it was an existence like a son, grandson, disciple, or grand-disciple. The hidden content under the seal was left behind by this person. As for the content outside the seal, there was a high probability that it was randomly added by the descendants of the Jiang clan. They didn't know what had happened back then, so they could only try their best to slander the sacred ancestor. From this, it could be seen that the Jiang clan's ancestor did not tell his descendants everything that happened back then. Thinking about it, this was also a form of protection. According to the records in the jade slip, the Grand Pure One and the Jiang clan's ancestor were indeed from the same sect. At that time, the overall strength of the Heaven's Pivot Realm was very powerful. According to the description in the jade slip, the Grand Pure One and the Jiang clan's ancestor had already reached the legendary Half-Saint realm. Half-saint? Chen Shi pondered for a long time before he made a rough judgment in his heart. Yuanying was equivalent to a divine general. Soul formation was equivalent to a heavenly venerable. Insightful void was equivalent to a supreme. The owner of the jade slip was a supreme. Then, the grand pure one, who could be called a half-saint by him, should at least be a big shot at the Tao integration stage, right? Thinking of this, Chen Shi lowered his head to look at the azure planet again. He was slightly excited and could not calm down. Earth was still the same Earth. However, the Earth of that era was completely different from the Earth of today. As the saying goes, heroes are created by the times. That era was simply a glorious era where stars gathered and heroes emerged in large numbers. But unfortunately, no matter how good the era was, it would eventually come to an end. As the spirit chi on Earth began to weaken rapidly, the glory of the heavens pivot realm was no longer the same as before. The ancient immortal cultivators had no choice but to start looking for a new cultivation holy land in order to continue their legacy. Just like in sci-fi movies, once the apocalypse arrived, everyone would make different choices. Thus, some people proposed to give up on the heavens pivot realm. With the half-saint as the leader, they would lead everyone across the void and find another place to live in the universe. In today's words, this group of people were typical radicals. This was because at least at the golden core stage could fly. Only at the Yuanying stage could one live freely in the universe for a long time. Since they could make such a suggestion, it actually meant that they wanted to give up on cultivators below the Yuanying stage. What kind of terrifying suggestion was this? Who didn't have relatives, friends, parents, and relatives in their life? Take Chen Shi as an example. He was already lonely enough, but how many people above the Yuanying stage did he have by his side? Cultivation was about talent and fate. Sometimes in life, one must have it, and when not in life, one should not force it. Yuanying was not so easy to get married. Once this decision was made, it was equivalent to giving up on most people on Earth. Even if the half-saint could lead many people across the void at the same time, he could not take everyone on Earth with him. What about the rest of the people? Let them perish on their own? Thus, this suggestion was quickly rejected. Seeing this, Chen Shi could not help but feel a little puzzled. Didn't Cheng Hua and Yi come from the Supreme Palace enclosure? Wasn't the Supreme Palace enclosure near the solar system? With the grand pure divine ancestor's realm, even if he used a stupid method that was close to moving a mountain, he could still bring everyone to the Supreme Palace enclosure, right? Could it be that the ancient immortal cultivators did not know that there was such a good place as the Supreme Palace enclosure near the solar system? Chen Shi really did not understand this point. But fortunately, this question was not important, so he quickly put this question to the back of his mind and then went on to sort it out. After the radical faction's suggestion was rejected, the conservative faction led by the Grand Pure Divine Ancestor and the Jiang Ancestor proposed a compromise. That was, integrate all the forces in the Tianshu realm and send out the strongest people from each sect. Then, these people would be led by a half-saint to find a suitable cultivation holy land in the universe. After they found it, everyone would come back to discuss how to move everyone on Earth over. This suggestion was unanimously approved by everyone. At the very least, they would not just pack up and leave, right? Thus, the Grand Pure Divine Ancestor and the others set off. But what no one expected was, when they left, they were gone for as long as 20 years. The people who stayed on Earth looked forward to the stars and the moon every day, almost always looking forward to their return. Finally, the Grand Pure Divine Ancestor and the others returned. It was important to note that when the Grand Pure Divine Ancestor set off, his cultivation was not much different from the others. He was only a half-saint. But by the time he came back, the Grand Pure Divine Ancestor had stepped into an unprecedented realm, a saint. This was an extremely good thing. After all, even though the Tianshu realm was unparalleled at that time, it had been tens of thousands of years since a saint had appeared. The Grand Pure Divine Ancestor's breakthrough was really good news for the ancient cultivators who were shrouded in the shadow of doomsday. But, before they could rejoice, bad news followed one after the other, and everyone was dumbfounded. Although the Grand Pure Divine Ancestor had successfully entered the Saint realm, the 5 half-saints and more than 10 supremes who had traveled with him had all died. Everyone was dead. Only the dying Jiang Ancestor was left. If the Grand Pure Divine Ancestor had not done his best to save him, even the Jiang Ancestor would have died on the way home. At that moment, there was only one question left in everyone's hearts. How is this possible? The 9 Heavens Divine Emperor. Chapter 477. No one knew what had happened to the sacred ancestor and his group in the depths of the starry sky. No matter who asked, the sacred ancestor kept his mouth shut. One had to know that the people who had traveled with him were all the top figures of the various sects and clans. These people had died in the depths of the universe without even a corpse. Naturally, their descendants could not accept this fact. As a result, the descendants of these half-step saints jointly wrote a letter, asking the sacred ancestor to give everyone a reasonable explanation. Although the sacred ancestor had given in, he did not tell everyone what had happened in the past 20 years. Instead, he gave a simple summary, saying that his group had encountered great danger in the Great Void and that it was already a great blessing to be able to return, and then there was no more. There was not even a reasonable explanation. This time, not only the descendants of the half-step saints, but even the ordinary onlookers could not help but be puzzled. Why are you able to survive when all of your companions are dead? Moreover, you lived a better and more carefree life, and even became a saint because of this? Due to the might of a saint and the fact that all the half-step saints who could mediate with him had fallen, the sacred ancestor became the #1 person in the heavens pivot realm after returning. No one dared to question him in front of his face, but the rumors became more and more intense in private. There were even some people who made wild guesses. The sacred ancestor and his group might have discovered the immortal emperor's treasury in the depths of the universe, and the half-step saints who accompanied them died in this treasury. Opportunities were always accompanied by risks. In the moment of danger, the sacred ancestor decisively dragged everyone down with him. As a result, he obtained the immortal emperor's inheritance and became a saint in a short 20 years. Otherwise, how could one explain the sacred ancestor's sudden increase in cultivation? This kind of baseless guess was almost equivalent to slander. Even so, the sacred ancestor was still unwilling to mention the details. In desperation, everyone could only cast their gazes on the last survivor of this trip, and that was the Jiang ancestor. At this time, it was likely that only the Jiang clan's ancestor knew what exactly happened in these 20 years. But what was regrettable was that, even though the Jiang ancestor's cultivation was extraordinary, when he was brought back by the Supreme Pure One, he was already heavily injured. For immortal cultivators, physical injuries were naturally not a problem. However, the Jiang clan's ancestor did not only have injuries on his physical body. The truly fatal injury was still the injury on his soul. It was unknown what they had experienced. At that time, only the owner of the jade slip was accompanying the Jiang clan ancestor, so the Jiang clan ancestor directly poured this memory into the mind of the owner of the jade slip. Then, as if he had obtained some kind of relief, the Jiang clan ancestor rode a crane to the west with a smile on his face. The last half-saint of the heavenly pivot realm fell. The Jiang clan ancestor left with a smile. However, after the owner of the jade slip obtained this memory, he was completely shocked by the scene in the memory. After thinking about it again and again, the owner of the jade slip decided to seal this past and record all the causes and effects into the jade slip. He set up a seal and waited for the fated person to know. Obviously, Qin Shi was that fated person. Therefore, he was also shocked by this memory at that time, which was why Yuhuan Tianzuan noticed something strange. It turned out that the Grand Pure Divine Ancestor and his group had never left the solar system. Just as they flew to Saturn, a dark fissure suddenly appeared in the void and sucked the group of half-sages and supreme martial artists into it. It was a boundless dark space. After the Jiang clan ancestor fell in, he was separated from the others. He flew in the dark space for thousands of years until he was exhausted and the true essence in his body was about to be exhausted. Only then did the Jiang clan ancestor discover a ray of light. Wasn't this feeling very familiar? Wasn't it exactly the same as the strange thing that Qin had experienced before? However, it was different from what Qin had experienced. After the Jiang clan ancestor escaped from the dark space, he did not go to the great world. Instead, he returned to the place where they had disappeared. Then, the Jiang clan ancestor met the grand pure divine ancestor who was quietly floating in the void and holding the heaven-bearing efficate floating mirror. At that moment, the image of the grand pure divine ancestor was completely different from the Jiang clan ancestor's memory. His appearance did not change at all. However, the monstrous pressure that was constantly emitted from his body, as well as that pair of eyes that looked down on all living things, made the Jiang clan ancestor, a half-saint, feel faintly panicked. Therefore, the Jiang clan ancestor firmly believed that the person in front of him was definitely not the grand pure divine ancestor he knew. As expected, just as the Jiang clan ancestor was stunned, the grand pure divine ancestor actually aimed the heaven-bearing efficate floating mirror at him. With a flash of white light, the Jiang clan ancestor's memory was completely cut off. However, the last scene in his memory was not the scene of the grand pure divine ancestor attacking him. Instead, it was the space wonder that had already formed behind the grand pure divine ancestor, scattered stars, 9-star alignment. Chapter 478. The moment he saw the 9 stars alignment, a series of information slowly emerged in Qin mind and gradually formed a clearer network. The dark space, the 9 stars alignment, the Tai Ching divine ancestor, the sky-bearing technique, the floating dawn mirror, the great terror in the depths of the void, and the mysterious woman entangled in chains. Until this moment, Qin finally understood what kind of terrifying level the mysterious woman's realm had reached. With the combined strength of the Tai Ching divine ancestor and the others, even in the heavenly jade domain, they were definitely a transcendent force comparable to a sacred ground. However, after they fell into the dark space, they were still so helpless. If not for the appearance of that white light, the Jiang ancestor might have been trapped alive inside. Even a supreme like Qin could enter and exit the dark space at will. How could a half-step sage like the Jiang ancestor not be able to freely travel through the various planes? From this, it could be seen that the Jiang ancestor was definitely controlled by some higher-level power, which caused him to be unable to successfully escape from the dark space. As for the reason why the white light appeared, combined with Qin previous experience, it should be the result of the mysterious woman and the Great Terror's game. It was obvious that the mysterious woman was kind to the cultivators from Earth, and the Great Terror's standpoint was completely different from the mysterious woman's. This was because Qin not only felt a strong pressure from him, but also a murderous aura that seemed to be mixed with mountains of corpses and seas of blood. If that powerful murderous aura was placed in the solar system, the result would be that wherever the murderous aura went, everything would wither and not a single blade of grass would grow. In addition, from the memories of the Jiang ancestor, the Tai Ching divine ancestor should have been possessed and controlled by someone. Even a half-step sage could be easily possessed, so how high was the other party's cultivation level? Above the sage was the Immortal Emperor. Whether it was the Heavenly Jade Domain or the Heavenly Pivot Domain, it had been a long time since an Immortal Emperor had appeared. The Immortal Emperor seemed to only exist in the myths and legends of the primordial era. If the Supreme Qin could destroy a planet with all his strength, then the Immortal Emperor could collapse the heavens and split the earth with a flick of his finger. It was truly the definition of holding the sun and moon in one's hand and stepping on the universe. Such a terrifying cultivation had completely exceeded the scope of Qin's imagination. Perhaps when one reached the mysterious woman's level, they should no longer be called immortal cultivators, but immortals. Qin looked down at the soul mirror in his hand, and a peculiar expression suddenly appeared on his face. The 9-star alignment in the memories of the Jiang clan's ancestor was actually different from what he saw with his own eyes. In the memories of the Jiang ancestor, The Grand Pure One held the soul mirror and floated in the air like a god. As the 9 stars lined up, strange nomological imprints appeared one after another in the periphery of the solar system. These nomological imprints shone with a dazzling golden light. They were like gold foil pasted on a circular wall, encompassing the entire solar system within them. Cheng-Hua, that brat, said, "For the past 10,000 years, there has been a powerful seal on the periphery of the solar system. Even if a celestial venerable were to come, he would definitely die." The two of them barged in recklessly, but unexpectedly, they didn't lose their lives because of this. Instead, they arrived on Earth without any obstructions. Calculating the time when the two of them came, wasn't it when Heaven Capital was destroyed? Could it be? This seal was removed because of this. But if there's a seal on the periphery of the solar system, why was I able to pass through this seal so easily and safely return to Earth? Could it be because of that mysterious woman again? And the reason why I suddenly went to the heavenly Jade Realm, which is billions of light years away, might also be related to that mysterious woman. At the thought of this, Chen Shi couldn't help but raise his head and look toward the distant edge of the solar system. At that moment, Chen Shi's eyes were no longer as clear as before. Instead, they were filled with curiosity toward this unknown world like that of a little fellow. The Immortal Emperor used the universe and the starry sky as a chessboard, and all living things as chess pieces. Then, what kind of chess game were they playing? While Chen Shi was focused on exploring the past, the young lady who had risked her life to barge into the heavenly pivot ruins had returned. However, this time, she was no longer alone. Instead, she had brought with her a team of several hundred people from the Supreme Palace enclosure. The young lady stood at the bow of the ship with an excited expression. If it weren't for the fact that there was a tall middle-aged man in his 40s standing beside her, she would have screamed out in excitement. "Xiao, or Daddy will ask you one last time. Are you sure you really entered the heavenly pivot ruins from here?" "Father, I've said it many times. I really went in. There's nothing inside. If you don't believe me, let me go in first later. I'll prove it to you." The young lady's name was Tuoba Xiao. The middle-aged man next to her was her father, Tabage. After Tabage received the news from his daughter, he considered the importance of this matter and didn't inform the family head immediately. Instead, he brought his personal guards and followed Tuoba Xiao here. Immortal cultivators had a long lifespan. It wasn't rare for 10 generations to live in the same house. Therefore, there were usually many large families in the Supreme Palace enclosure. One could refer to the Jiang clan on Daiyu Island for this. The Xianyuan, Dongfang, and Tuoba families were all large families in the Supreme Palace enclosure. But different from Xianyuan Cheng-Hua and Dongfang, Tuoba Xiao came from a branch family. So in terms of background, Tuoba Xiao was absolutely not worthy of Dongfang Yiji. And this was one of the important reasons why she was willing to die for Dongfang Yiji. From the moment the two of them started dating, Tuoba Xiao felt that she wasn't worthy of Dongfang Yiji. So, she sacrificed far more than Dongfang Yiji. Under the leadership of Tuoba Xiao, the group soon arrived at the location where she entered the heavenly pivot ruins. Out of caution, Tabage didn't let his daughter take the risk. Instead, he called out 2 men from the team and let them go to explore. These men were prisoners from hostile forces of the family. After being captured by the Tuoba family, they had been brainwashed and controlled by a secret method. They had completely become the Tuoba family's pawns. Although their cultivation wasn't high, they were not afraid of death. They were the best candidates to explore the way. Soon, the 2 men piloted a small starship and rushed directly to the heavenly pivot ruins. Tabage nervously waited on the side. The moment he saw the 2 figures disappear, his pupils shrank. If it weren't for Tuoba Xiao guaranteeing with her life, Tabage would never have believed her words. He was different from Tuoba Xiao's naivety. Tabage knew that once this news was confirmed, it would cause a sensation in the Supreme Palace enclosure. Therefore, after sending the men to investigate, Tabage's mood was even more nervous than Tuoba Xiao's. He paced back and forth on the bow of the ship. After waiting for about half an incense stick of time, Tobagwe finally saw the scene he had been dreaming of. Those two men, they actually came out of the heavenly pivot ruins unscathed. Listen to my orders, set off. Destination, heavenly pivot ruins. Come, wonderful book house. This was the fundamental reason why the Grand Pure Ancestor and the others had spent so much effort to find another cave abode in the universe. Dongshu stage immortal cultivators would only be able to freely travel to and from small planes after finding them through spatial rifts and setting up coordinates in them. Night. After the little fellow fell asleep, Chen Shi couldn't wait to fly into the air and get busy. This was the first time he took the initiative to enter the dark space. Therefore, after closing his eyes and adjusting his breathing to bring his body to the best state, Chen Shi gently exhaled a mouthful of turbid air and prepared to start trying to open the passage between the two worlds. Opening the passage was actually the same as opening the heavenly gate. Therefore, the moment Chen Shi moved, an extremely strong spiritual energy fluctuation was set off 10,000 meters in the sky. Under the guidance of the spiritual energy, the clouds were like a vortex, gradually forming a huge cyclone. Then, an extremely dazzling light suddenly bloomed in the center of the cyclone. Like the heavenly gate, the position of the light was obviously the entrance of the passage between the two worlds. Seeing this, Chen Shi didn't hesitate at all. His body swayed and he directly flew toward the light. It was like diving from a high platform. The moment Chen Shi's body disappeared into the light, the entire world suddenly quieted down. There was no sound and no light. He was back. Chen Shi lit up a ball of light and looked around. After confirming that he was back in the familiar dark space, he directly sat cross-legged in this endless void. At this moment, he was the only source of light in this dark space. As the deduction continued, two faintly discernible golden lines gradually appeared beside Chen Shi. These were the two lines of law that he currently controlled. One led to Earth, the other to the outside world. 2 points as a line. As long as he found the base of the two planes, he could use this line of law to travel back and forth between the two worlds. Point, line, surface, body. And this was the basic form of the first law of heaven and earth. When Chen Shi was able to freely control face, his cultivation would naturally be able to take another step forward. Today was the weekend. Primary school students did not have to go to school on weekends, so every Saturday night, the little girl would play until late into the night, until the next morning when she would wake up. Early in the morning, the little girl did not see Chen Shi when she woke up, so she took advantage of the time when Qin Ruoying was cooking for her to stroll around the courtyard. After this period of time together, Cheng Hua and Yiji were already very familiar with the little girl. Therefore, when the little girl saw the two dejected coming out of the room, she enthusiastically greeted them. "Brother Cheng Hua, brother Yiji, good morning." "Good morning, Nyan. Good morning to you." Cheng Hua did not say anything, and Yi did not seem to be in a good mood. After trying hard to squeeze out a smile at the little girl, the two were like students who had made a mistake, obediently waiting outside the Chuehua gate for Qin Xueqing's call. It was not that they were deliberately giving the little girl a hard time, but the reason why their mood was so heavy was because today was the day of being beaten again. Qin Wanqing was incredible now. After this period of actual combat tempering, she had completely walked out of a martial artist's path that belonged to her. So even if the two of them attacked together, they were not her match at all. Qin Xueqing seemed to be very vengeful. As her strength grew stronger, her attacks became more and more ruthless, so that the two of them would be beaten half to death by her every time. Although their lives were not in danger, but it was really painful. Looking at the two of them now, where was the young and frivolous attitude they had when they first came here? Their injuries had just recovered, and sister-in-law was ready to ask them to go out to practice again. The little girl did not know the details. Therefore, when she saw Qin Xueqing coming out of the room, she enthusiastically greeted Qin Xueqing. "Aunt, are you going out to play? Can you bring me along?" Hearing this, Qin Xueqing suddenly stopped in her tracks. She lowered her head and looked at the cute little niece in front of her, who was like a porcelain doll. Looking at her big bright eyes, Qin Xueqing could not help but hesitate for a moment, as if she was thinking about something. After a while, Qin Xueqing made a decision in her heart. Didn't she not want Nian Nian to cultivate? Then I'll make her want to learn. Therefore, Qin Xueqing was like an evil woman who used a lollipop to lure a little girl, and for the first time, a smile hung on her face. Nian Nian, Aunt wants to take them to practice martial arts. It's the kind of martial arts that you see on TV. Do you want to learn? If you want to learn, Aunt can teach you. Jiutian Divine Emperor. Chapter 480. Martial Arts. After hearing Qin Xueqing's words, the little fellow suddenly blinked her eyes blankly. It was no wonder that her reaction would be so cute and slow. After all, Nian Nian was still young. Currently, she was only at the age where she liked to watch cartoons. Although it was not that she had never watched wuxia movies, but the wuxia movies that were popular in recent years could not be regarded as wuxia movies in the true sense. At best, they could only be regarded as historical romance movies. Just based on those melodramatic romantic scenes, how could they win the hearts of children? Therefore, the little fellow's impression of martial arts was completely at the ignorant stage. She could not be compared to the children of the 80s and 90s. 20 or 30 years ago, children usually liked to use a wooden stick as a long sword. They learned the martial arts moves on TV, and before they made a move, they must shout out the name of the move. For example, the 18 dragons subduing palms, 9 strategies beyond the swords, Buddha's palm and other martial arts skills. Basically every child knew 1 or 2 moves. Thinking about it, he felt a little regretful. It was a pity that the little fellow was not born in the hot-blooded era where the martial arts atmosphere was pervasive. Qin Xueqing's attitude towards the little fellow had always been neither cold nor warm. Today, she rarely took the initiative to take her to play, so the little fellow was naturally very happy. Therefore, she immediately blinked her big bright eyes, and then slightly tilted her head and asked in a coquettish voice, "Auntie, what is martial arts? Is it fun?" "It's fun. After you learn it, you can be like the heroes on TV. There's nothing you can't do." "Really?" "Of course, why would Auntie lie to you?" At this moment, the smile on Qin Xueqing's face was really very bright. Looking at her proud look, she was simply like a demon holding candy to lure a little girl. She was just short of raising her tail. "Hey, you two come over here, I'll show Nian Nian what martial arts are." Qin Xueqing had always been taciturn. Today, in order to lure the little fellow to take the bait, she really used 120% of her strength. Seeing that the little guy seemed to be tempted, Qin Xueqing immediately let Chenghua and Yi come to the center of the courtyard, ready to use them as punching bags to show the little guy what martial arts were. Since he said it was martial arts, then he definitely couldn't use magic. Chenghua and Yi had been beaten up all this time, and under the influence of what they heard and saw, the two of them had learned a few fierce moves. As a result, a scene that shocked the little fellow appeared. In the center of the courtyard, Qin Xueqing was like a graceful butterfly, sometimes leaping up, sometimes crouching on the ground, twisting and turning, displaying her graceful figure. Perhaps it was because Qin Xueqing rarely sparred with others in the outside world, so even though her martial cultivation was extremely profound, she still lacked the fierce killing intent that came from mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Therefore, her martial arts looked more like a dance. "It's beautiful. Auntie is so beautiful." Since it was an exhibition match, Qin Xueqing's moves were naturally more gentle than usual, and it could be said that she didn't overdo it. The little fellow couldn't see the subtlety of it, but he was still completely attracted by her graceful dancing posture, so he excitedly clapped at the side. Looking at the little fellow's eager appearance, Qin Xueqing couldn't help but smile slightly. After forcing Chenghua and Yi back with one palm, she lightly landed beside the little fellow, then asked with a smile, "How is it? Do you want to learn?" Hearing this, the little fellow immediately nodded his head like he was pounding garlic. "Yes." "Okay, then come over here. Auntie will help you stretch your tendons and pull out your bones." Okay. The little fellow didn't understand, only thinking that Qin Shueqing wanted to play a game with him, so he eagerly went over. Just as Qin Shueqing was teaching the little fellow the horse stance, Chen Shi finally returned to the courtyard. This was the first time he entered the dark space, and he hadn't figured out the specific time ratio between the two worlds, so it caused him to come back slightly late. If it was in the past, it wouldn't be a problem if Chen Shi came back a little late. But today was different. Qin Shueqing actually took advantage of his absence to start teaching the little fellow cultivation. Therefore, the moment Chen Shi's figure appeared in the courtyard, the temperatures seemed to drop a lot. "What are you doing?" Chen Shi's tone didn't have any emotional fluctuations, as if he was talking about something very ordinary, but those who were familiar with him should know. This was a sign that he was angry. Chen Shi was angry? After realizing that something big might happen next, Cheng Hua and Yi immediately looked at each other, then quietly left the courtyard. It wasn't good to stay here for long, leaving was the best plan. At this moment, the little fellow also noticed Chen Shi's figure, so she immediately stopped what she was doing and ran towards Chen Shi eagerly. "Daddy, you're back?" The little fellow happily jumped into Chen Shi's arms. Chen Shi gently pinched her little face, then directly carried her from the ground. "Yes, Daddy went out to do something just now, so I didn't have time to make breakfast for you. You're not hungry, are you?" "I'm not hungry." The father and daughter talked as if there was no one else around, while Qin Shueqing waited silently by the side. When Chen Shi looked at her, Qin Shueqing calmly replied, "I'm teaching her martial arts." Hearing this, before Chen Shi could reply, the little fellow happily interrupted and shouted, "Auntie is teaching me martial arts, it's very fun. Daddy, do you want to learn?" "Is that so?" Chen Shi chuckled. He gently reached out and pinched the tip of the little fellow's nose, which immediately caused her to act coquettishly. Chen Shi seemed to be trying to make the little girl happy, but a question suddenly popped out of her mouth. "Why did you teach her without my permission?" It had to be said that his sister-in-law's behavior today really annoyed Chen Shi a little. After all, from the day he returned to Earth, he had made up his mind to create an ordinary and happy childhood for the little fellow, just like ordinary children, to enjoy the pure happiness that they should enjoy at their age. The road of cultivation was long, but childhood was only a few short years. Did he want to deprive her of even these short years? "She's willing to learn, I'm willing to teach, it's that simple. Then did you ask for my consent? Do you need it? Don't you need it?" Hearing this, Qin Shueqing couldn't help but sneer, and coldly replied, "I started practicing martial arts when I was 3 years old. I had already practiced obvious strength when I was her age. Since learning martial arts is good for the body, why don't you let her learn? She's just a child." This time, Chen Shi was really a little angry, so even his tone became much colder. Seeing this, Qin Shueqing was not afraid. Instead, she righteously retorted, "She is also a person with the ability to think independently. Please ask her whether she is willing to do it before you make a decision for her." Being choked by Qin Shueqing, Chen Shi was so angry that he couldn't even speak. At this moment, the atmosphere in the yard was really a little awkward. The little fellow lay on Chen Shi's shoulder, looking left and right at her father, right at her aunt, completely not understanding what they were quarreling about. But fortunately, just when Chen Shi and Qin Shueqing were in a deadlock, Qin Ruing suddenly appeared. She was holding a bowl of hot porridge in her hand, which was the white fungus and lotus seed porridge that she personally cooked for the little fellow. "Nian Nian, come in and eat." Then, as if he had thought of something, he suddenly got up and quickly left the room, then came to the outside of the west wing, and looked at the mother and daughter in the room through the window. In the room, the little fellow was holding a big bowl of porridge and slurping it. Qin Ruing sat next to her and whispered from time to time, "Drink slowly, be careful not to choke." What a beautiful scene this was. Seeing this scene, Chen Shi's depression in his heart suddenly disappeared. He silently waited outside the window. After the little fellow finished her breakfast, she looked back and saw that her father was still outside the room. She immediately became as happy as a little bird, opened her arms and threw herself directly into Qin Shi's arms. "Dad, the porridge made by Mom is delicious. But Mom also said that you can't eat it. Dad, are you envious of me?" Hearing this, Qin Shi couldn't help but laugh and pinch her little face, pretending to scare her. "Eat all you know is to eat all day. Be careful, you will become a big fatty in the future, then no one will like you." "Why won't anyone like me if I become fat?" "Dad, didn't you say that you like me the most?" The little fellow pouted unhappily, as if she was angry. Seeing this, Qin Shi could only quickly coax her. "Dad will definitely like you, no matter how you look in the future. In Dad's heart, Nian Nian will always be the most beautiful girl in the world." After hearing Qin Shi's answer, the little fellow rolled her big eyes and suddenly grinned. "What about Mom? Is Mom not beautiful?" "Mom is as beautiful as you." "Really?" "Of course, you are Mom's child. How could you look different from Mom?" "That's right. Then when I grow up, I will definitely be as beautiful as Mom." As if she had encountered something extremely happy, the little fellow giggled, which made Qin Shi couldn't help but laugh foolishly with her. The father and daughter stood on the steps and whispered to each other. After Qin Ruoying cleaned up the table and prepared to go back to the kitchen to wash the dishes, Qin Shi offered to help her wash the dishes. Unexpectedly, Qin Ruoying didn't even look at him. She carried the bowl and chopsticks to the kitchen, minding her own business. Qin Shi had long been used to Qin Ruoying's current attitude, so he didn't take it to heart. Seeing that his wife didn't need his help, he carried the little fellow back to the guest room where he was currently staying. Just as he returned to the room, Qin Shi put away the smile on his face, and with a very serious expression, he looked at the little fellow and asked, "Nian Nian, tell Dad honestly, do you like the things that Auntie taught you?" Hearing this, the little fellow blinked her eyes, as if she didn't quite understand the meaning of his words. Just as Qin Shi expected, she was only a 6-year-old child. How could she understand what cultivation meant? Chapter 482. Do you want to learn? The little fellow was not used to Qin Shi being so serious. Therefore, while she was thinking hard about the true meaning of this sentence, she couldn't help but put her thumb in her mouth. While sucking on her finger, she tilted her head and seriously thought about her father's words. "You're not allowed to eat your finger." Qin Shi saw the little fellow's hesitation. Therefore, he gently removed the little fellow's finger from her mouth and hugged her in his arms. Then, using a very gentle tone, he asked again, "Don't be afraid, just tell Daddy if you want to learn or not. If you want to learn, Daddy will teach you. I promise I'll teach you better than Auntie." After hearing Qin Shi's words, the little fellow finally reacted. She rubbed her head against Qin Shi's shoulder a few times before hesitantly replying, "Yes." Her voice fell. Without waiting for Qin Shi's reply, the little fellow looked up nervously and asked, "Daddy, is learning to dance very difficult?" "There are many children in our class learning to dance. They say learning to dance is very, very tiring and very painful. I'm not afraid of being tired, but I'm afraid of pain." The little fellow's voice became softer and softer until it was almost inaudible like a mosquito. At this moment, Qin Shi finally understood her thoughts. After all this time, the child actually understood learning martial arts as learning to dance? Qin Shi did not know whether to laugh or cry. Looking at the little fellow's reluctant look, Qin Shi could not help but smile and rub her little head. Then he carried her to the bed and said to her with a serious face, "Nian Nian, you have to know. No matter what you learn before you learn it, it will be a very difficult and tiring process. So before you choose to learn, you have to make up your mind and confirm if you can really endure this hardship. If you feel tired and tiring halfway through learning, or even unwilling to learn anymore, then no matter if you learn to dance, learn to draw, or learn anything else, you are destined to achieve nothing. So you must remember what I said to you today. There is only one way to fail, and that is to give up halfway. Once you've made your choice, you have to persevere no matter how hard it is. Do you understand?" Qin Shi tried his best to speak slowly so that the little fellow could hear every word he said. After hearing this, the little fellow's reaction was just as Qin Shi had expected. After all, Nian Nian had never been a spoiled child who was afraid of hardship and fatigue. She could understand and distinguish right from wrong. Therefore, when Chen Shi asked her again if she wanted to learn, the little girl's hesitation disappeared and turned into determination. Whether it was learning martial arts or dancing, it was fine. The little fellow's attitude was what Chen Shi really cared about. Since she had already made up her mind, how could Chen Shi stop her? All right, then Daddy will teach you personally. Remember, don't listen to your aunt in the future. Jingle, jingle, jingle. What does she know? Daddy can flatten her with one hand. Come, 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 sit down first. Daddy will teach you how to draw chi into your body. Don't worry, it won't hurt at all. Chen Shi finally began to teach the little fellow cultivation. Of course, the things he taught were completely different from what Qin Xueqing taught. Qin Xueqing only wanted to teach the little fellow martial arts, but Chen Shi directly taught her the immortal cultivation method. So the question was, why didn't her sister-in-law directly teach the little fellow the immortal cultivation method that Qin Shi taught her? Instead, she only taught the little fellow some basic skills of tendons and bones? One had to know that her sister-in-law had been a heavenly being for a long time and was already considered a real immortal cultivator. The reason why she didn't directly teach the little fellow cultivation was actually because she had considered Qin Shi's attitude towards this matter. Therefore, she used martial arts as an excuse to indirectly remind Qin Shi. The child was not young anymore, so she naturally knew what to do and what not to do. Since cultivation was not harmful to the little fellow, and it could even strengthen her body and enhance her physique, why didn't she learn it? Swords and sabers were innocent, and sins were all caused by people's hearts. Qin Xueqing's point of view was not wrong, so although she had a sour face all day long, her heart was warm. Chen Shi was afraid that the little fellow would accidentally hurt other children at school, but with the little fellow's current wisdom, how could she bully others for no reason? After all, she was now a class leader, a young pioneer, and a candidate for the school's 3 good students. Under Qin Shi's careful guidance, the little fellow embarked on her own journey of cultivation in a daze. At the same time, Tuoba Xiu hurried to Earth with her reinforcements. Unlike Tuoba Xiu's excitement, although Tabagwe was also very excited, he was more nervous and puzzled in his heart. There were too many rumors about the Dubhe ruins, so even though Tabagwe was now in this peaceful galaxy, he still felt like he was in a dream. Out of safety considerations, Tabagwe didn't send out any death warriors to explore the planets. Instead, he used his divine sense to quickly sweep the planets. After determining that there were no signs of surging heaven and earth's spiritual energy, he hurried to the next planet. Their journey here had been too smooth. It was different from the mountains of knives, seas of fire, and hellish danger that people had always imagined. The so-called Dubhe ruins was in fact an ordinary galaxy that couldn't be more ordinary. There was only one star in this galaxy, and although the rest of the planets were large, they weren't life planets at all. There wasn't even a bit of heaven and earth spiritual energy in the periphery. There was no spiritual energy, no life. Naturally, it was impossible to give birth to any ancient vicious beasts, evil spirits, or other such terrifying existences. Therefore, Tabagwe couldn't help but wonder if he had come to the wrong place. How could such a broken place be called an Empyrean forbidden area? Could it be his cultivation was too low, so he couldn't discern the mystery? Tabagwe was really puzzled. But at this time, the lookout who had been standing at the bow of the ship and observing the situation suddenly cried out in alarm. "There's someone there." The moment Tabagwe heard these words, it was as if he had been electrocuted. He suddenly shot up from his chair and flew to the bow of the ship at the fastest speed he had ever flown in his life. "Where is it?" Before Tabagwe arrived, Tabagwe's voice had already sounded in the lookout's ear. The lookout pointed. Just as Tabagwe was about to speak, Tabagwe had already turned and rushed to the helm of the ship. "Turn the helm and head to that planet. From now on, listen to my orders in all matters. Don't make a move without permission. If the situation changes, I will use the cup as a signal to kill all of you. Remember, remember." As Tobagwe issued a series of orders, the incomparably huge Star Cha also turned around and flew towards the seemingly small moon. Wonderful book house. The people on the boat seemed to know that there was a seal here. As soon as the ship stopped, a figure flew out from it. The person who came was Tobagwe. Tobagwe's cultivation was only at Yuanying, so as he got closer and closer to the moon, his mood became more and more nervous. Because he saw the Star Lords and Divine Generals who were busy on the ground, and he also felt an incomparably strong true essence fluctuation from these people. These people in front of him were all existences above golden core. And looking at their busy posture, it seemed that they were doing some of the lowest level of manual labor. Using golden core yuanying as manual labor? After seeing this scene, Tobagwe was really frightened. The cultivation of this person in front of me is unfathomable. I can't feel a trace of true essence fluctuation from him. And looking at this person's expression and posture, it seems that he is supervising the work of these people? Could it be, this person is the master of the Dubhe ruins? In the blink of an eye, countless thoughts flashed through Tobagwe's mind. He saw Yuhuan Tianzuan, and Yuhuan Tianzuan also saw him. This was the gaze of an Empyrean. At that moment, Tobagwe felt a pressure like a falling stone smashing into his heart. So, he immediately cupped his fists towards Yuhuan Tianzuan and bowed. Then, he said in a clear voice, "Junior Tobagwe greets Senior." Yuhuan Tianzuan didn't answer. He was like an aloof emperor. After sizing up Tobagwe, he looked at the giant ship to the side. Seeing Yuhuan Tianzuan not speak, Tobagwe thought that his trespassing on the Dubhe ruins had angered him. Therefore, after a moment of hesitation, he immediately added, "I have long heard of the Dubhe ruins' reputation. Today, I trespassed on this precious land for a reason. I hope Senior won't blame me." Tobagwe lowered his posture to a very low level. Even so, Yuhuan Tianzuan still didn't respond. Tobagwe thought that Yuhuan Tianzuan was deliberately putting on airs for him to see. So, he bowed his head towards Yuhuan Tianzuan again and said, "A few days ago, Junior's two unworthy nephews trespassed on this precious land because they were young and ignorant. Now that there is no news of them, my family is a little worried. After several discussions, my family's elders sent Junior to look for traces of them. My children are young and ignorant. If they have disturbed you, I hope Senior won't blame them. Here, Tobagwe, I apologize to Senior on their behalf." As Lin Ming's voice fell, Tobagwe still maintained his bowing posture. He seemed to be waiting for Yuhuan Tianzuan's reply. In truth, this was also a kind of probe. He was probing Yuhuan Tianzuan's attitude towards these intruders so that Tobagwe could think of a way to deal with them. From beginning to end, Yuhuan Tianzuan didn't respond. Even the expression on his face didn't change. No matter what Yuhuan Tianzuan said next, he would never take half a step closer to this great array formation. As long as he could endure until the body lock technique was lifted, he would immediately take his people and leave this damned place. The reason was simple. Even a fierce character like Yuhuan Tianzuan was imprisoned here. Then, what kind of terrifying existence was the one who imprisoned him? So even if Tobagwe was given 10 times the courage, he still wouldn't explore the Dubhe ruins. Tobagwe honestly waited for Yuhuan Tianzuan to ask his questions. But after waiting for a while, Yuhuan Tianzuan seemed to have finished discussing with the other Empyreans. Then he finally asked his first question. First question, how is my Tiandu's strength? How is it compared to your Tuoba family? Tiandu's strength is valiant, superior to the Tuoba family by 30%. Second question, with Tiandu's strength, what is its position in the Supreme Palace enclosure? Hearing this, Tobagwe couldn't help but be stunned. At this point in time, he had also vaguely guessed Heavenly Venerate Yuhuan's objective. Therefore, his originally relaxed state of mind became tense again. It is in the top 3, but if it is compared with Jade Clear Grotto Heaven, Tiandu may be slightly inferior. After hearing this, Yuhuan Tianzuan's face suddenly flashed with a trace of surprise. He probably didn't expect that, with Tiandu's strength, it was actually not the top force in the Supreme Palace enclosure. But this was also good, because only in this way could he be more confident in achieving his goal. So, after Yuhuan Tianzuan was silent for a while, he finally asked his third question. Third question: if my Tiandu is willing to unite with the Tuoba family in the form of marriage, can the Tuoba family accept my Tiandu to enter the Supreme Palace enclosure and become a force for the Tuoba family? Wonderful book house. If this old man is not wrong with your aptitude, it will probably take you another 300 to 500 years to successfully advance to the celestial venerable realm. Since that's the case, let's make a deal. As long as you agree to this old man's request, this old man can guarantee that you will become a heavenly venerable within 60 years. What do you think? After hearing these words, Tobagwe was thoroughly shocked. Yuhuan Tianzuan's words were tactful enough. In reality, how could he not know how capable he was? Not to mention 300 to 500 years, even if he spent his entire life, with his talent, he might not be able to successfully advance to Empyrean. Therefore, after hearing Yuhuan Tianzuan promise that he could successfully advance to Empyrean within 60 years, Tobagwe's heart was finally moved. I don't know what Senior's request is. If it is not beyond the scope of this junior's ability, this junior can give it a try. Hearing this, Yuhuan Tianzuan's face suddenly revealed a satisfied smile. Don't worry, I won't embarrass you. As long as you agree to this old man's request, this old man can even make a heart demon oath here, guaranteeing that I will fulfill my promise in the future. So, can we talk openly and honestly now? After a detailed discussion, Tobagwe and Yuhuan Tianzuan finally reached a consensus. Yuhuan Tianzuan's request was very simple. That was, Tobagwe would send out death warriors to wreak havoc on Earth in order to contain Qinshi. At the same time, Yuhuan Tianzuan would gather everyone's strength and take advantage of this opportunity to break the seal of the Great Array. As long as the Great Array was broken, the remnants of Tiandu would immediately board the giant ship and leave the Dubhe ruins with Tobagwe. Wasn't the plan simple? Whether this seemingly simple plan could be carried out smoothly or not, in fact, it would depend on how much Yuhuan Tianzuan knew about Qinshi. Qinshi was indeed a supreme, but he was not an omniscient and omnipotent god. As long as Tobagwe followed the plan and simultaneously launched a destructive attack on Earth from all directions, then, would Qinshi rush over to stop them from breaking the array as soon as possible? Or would he rush over to deal with those ants that dared to cause trouble in his territory? For Yuhuan Tianzuan, the ancient immortal cultivators represented by Tiandu were obviously the true masters of Earth. Therefore, the Homo evolutus living on Earth were nothing more than ants to him. If it wasn't for Qinshi stopping him in time, causing him to fail in building the Soul Bridge, then Tiandu should have successfully descended to Earth by now. Once Tiandu succeeded in descending, what followed would inevitably be a massacre that would sweep across the globe. Dynasties would change, rivers and mountains would change masters. A new regime would always be built on the corpses of countless people. With Yuhuan Tianzuan's understanding of Qinshi, he could basically be sure that, once Earth was threatened, Qinshi would inevitably solve it as soon as possible. Then, they could use this opportunity to break the seal and fly freely in the sky. Yuhuan Tianzuan used the entire Tiandu as a bargaining chip and the Empyrean realm as bait. Not only did he satisfy the collective interests of the Tuoba family, but he also satisfied Tobagwe's personal interests. Then, what reason did Tobagwe have not to take the risk? Take a gamble and turn a bicycle into a motorcycle. Take a gamble and turn yellow soil into gold. Under Tobagwe's command, all the death warriors he brought with him were dispatched. In order to ensure the success of the plan, Tobagwe gave all his magic weapons to these death warriors, hoping that they could delay Qinshi for a while. Tuoba Xiu didn't know what agreement her father and Yuhuan Tianzuan had reached. However, when she saw those small star carts, each carrying 3 to 5 men of sacrifice, she faintly had a bad premonition in her heart. "Father, what are you doing?" Tuoba Xiao wanted to know the details. But what she didn't expect was her father, who had always been very gentle to her, seemed to have changed at this moment. Not only did he not answer her question, but he impatiently locked her in the cabin. "Father, what's wrong with you? Let me out." Tuoba Xiao struggled with all her might. But the cabin door had been set up by Tabague, so she couldn't go out at all. Seeing that Tabague didn't respond for a long time, Tuoba Xiao finally gave up this futile struggle. Then she silently went to a porthole and looked at the blue planet not far away through the porthole. She stared at the planet in a daze. Suddenly, a strong true essence fluctuation that made one's heart palpitate suddenly surged out from the side. Tuoba Xiao quickly looked down and saw a group of people led by Yuhuan Tianzuan floating at the edge of the array, attacking it with all their strength. Their plan, it began. Chapter 486. Tabague had brought a total of 200 death warriors with him, but unfortunately, the average cultivation of these death warriors wasn't high. Besides a few golden cores, most of them were at the foundation establishment stage. Therefore, in addition to these death warriors, Tabague had to sacrifice most of his followers in order to ensure the smooth progress of the plan. Although most of these followers were from the side branches of the Toba family, they were still considered to be from the same branch as Tabague. Some of them even called him grandfather. It was precisely because of this that when Tabague made this decision, his heart was actually dripping blood. This was the so-called success of a general was built on the bones of 10,000. In the face of absolute benefits, the only thing Tabague could do was silently make a promise in his heart. He promised that he would treat the family of these followers well in the future. This was an unavoidable sacrifice for the sake of a great cause. Tabague believed that, once the plan succeeded as a party to this transaction, he would obtain an unimaginable interest. In fact, as long as he could smoothly become an Empyrean, then with the support of Yuhuan Tianzuan, Tabague could even choose to establish his own family and become a rising power comparable to the Tuoba family. In order to lure Tabague into the trap, Yuhuan Tianzuan had even directly made a heart demon oath in front of him. In the face of such generous transaction conditions and such an honest transaction partner, how could Tabague not be moved? Of course, there were risks. Since he chose to stand on Yuhuan Tianzuan's side, it meant that he would inevitably become a thorn in the side of the master of the Dubhe ruins. Once the plan failed, Tabague didn't need to think to know how miserable his fate would be. Even so, Tabague chose to stand on the side of benefits. Only children could distinguish between right and wrong. Adults only looked at benefits. In the face of absolute benefits, some people could even betray their own flesh and blood, let alone distant relatives 3 or 5 generations away. Therefore, the Tuoba family's action team set out according to plan. In order to delay as much time as possible, Tabague ordered 3 people to form a group. Each group would drive a small star car to ensure that when they were intercepted, they wouldn't be shot down by the other side. These small star cars weren't high grade, so they didn't have the ability to jump through space. However, even at full speed, his speed was still comparable to that of a Yuanine cultivator. Thus, not long after these over 100 teams set out, Tabague received a reply from each team. The various groups were already in position. They were only waiting for Tabague's order. Then these warriors from Supreme Palace enclosure would immediately enter the atmosphere, setting off a storm of blood and dismembered limbs. Because Chen Shi had always prided himself as an ordinary person, so from the moment of his return, he only wanted to be like an ordinary person, to have an ordinary and happy family, to live an ordinary and happy life. Chen Shi had truly achieved a small recluse in the wild and a large recluse in the city. But it was precisely because of this He was found an opportunity by Yuhuan Tianzuan and successfully exploited such a big loophole. Thinking of this, Chen Shi couldn't wait to rush to the moon immediately and tear Yuhuan Tianzuan into pieces with his own hands. But the current situation forced him to stay on Earth. After all, if he delayed here for a second, another city might become a sea of fire. In the face of those ruthless immortal cultivators, what could the poor human beings do to resist? In desperation, Chen Shi had to look up in the direction of the moon and fiercely gritted his teeth and directly made his heart demon oath. Yuhuan Tianzuan, what a good Yuhuan Tianzuan. Don't you like to make a heart demon oath? Then I, Chen Shi, will also make a heart demon oath today. If I don't kill you in this life, I swear that I am not human. His mouth contained the heavenly law, and his words were law. If there was any disobedience, there would be no hope for the heavenly law in this life. But at this critical juncture, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him and risked his life to block this fatal blow for him. Of course, this person couldn't be Tuoba Xiu. Moreover, Tuoba Xiu didn't have such ability. Therefore, when this person risked his life to block this blow for Tabagwe, even Chen Shi couldn't help but show a trace of surprise. At that moment, time seemed to stand still. The focus of the audience was on this figure. This person, wasn't it Yuhuan Tianzuan? No one could smoothly block the full blow of a supreme martial artist. Yuhuan Tianzuan was no exception. Therefore, the moment the tens of thousands of swords arrived, the energy around Yuhuan Tianzuan's body suddenly stagnated. The protective shield also cracked and collapsed. In front of an insightful Void Realm expert, a Divine Transformation Realm expert had no ability to resist. But even so, Yuhuan Tianzuan had no intention of retreating. He looked up to the sky and roared. The defensive magic weapon on his body suddenly bloomed with a burst of brilliant light. Even if a supreme martial artist is above, I will not retreat half a step. In an instant, the body of the 10 celestial sovereigns, who had been in a high position for a long time, burst out with a tenacious fighting spirit that didn't fear death. Bang, bang, bang. 10,000 swords returned to origin was very different from other moves. This move's sword chi was vigorous and long. After the move was released, it was like a huge wave. Wave after wave bombarded the enemy's body continuously until the attack was completely eliminated. Under such a violent collision, the people on the ship naturally reacted at this moment. Then they spontaneously attacked Chen Shi. Seeing that things were not going well, Chen Shi could only hurriedly withdraw his true essence and then escape into the void again. This was the method of an insightful emptiness. His movements were erratic and formless, making it impossible for others to detect his presence. When Chen Shi disappeared like this, the people no longer attacked randomly. Instead, they rushed forward like a swarm of bees and hurriedly protected Yuhuan Tianzuan in the center. Seeing that Yuhuan Tianzuan's situation was not very good, Celestial Sovereign Xuanzhen immediately stepped forward to support him. Then he asked with concern, "Yuhuan, are you okay?" "I'm fine." Yuhuan Tianzuan clearly suffered a heavy blow from Chen Shi, but at this moment, it was as if nothing had happened. Other than his pale face, Celestial Sovereign Xuanzhen could not see any injuries on his body. Celestial Sovereign Xuanzhen seemed to want to ask something. However, Yuhuan Tianzuan directly waved his hand and quickly ordered the people, "Formation! The crisis is not over yet. Don't be distracted." As expected, before Yuhuan Tianzuan's voice died away, Chen Shi's figure once again appeared in front of everyone's eyes. He had missed the best opportunity when he missed his attack just now. At present, Most of the remaining Heaven Capital troops were concentrated near the rudder. Even Qin Shi did not have the confidence to break their formation in an instant. Therefore, he could only move to the stern of the ship and concentrate all his true essence on his hand. This time, he did not use a sword. Instead, he chose a saber that he did not use often. The sword was nimble and the saber was strong and fierce. Great clumsiness turned into simplicity. One saber was enough. The third move of the flaming sun saber technique. One saber cleaving the sky. They saw, the moment Qin Shi appeared, he was already holding the saber with both hands. The tip of the saber was pointed at the sky. Such a powerful move, even if it had not been used yet, its power could not be concealed. When Heavenly Venerable Yu Huan sensed the commotion, his expression immediately changed. He shouted fiercely at the crowd, "Quick! Stop him!" Hearing this, everyone turned around, wanting to launch a joint attack on Qin Shi again. But could their speed be faster than Qin Shi? So the moment everyone turned around, Qin Shi drew his saber. At that moment, he was like a god descending, proudly standing above all living beings. Man and saber became one. The saber aura suddenly came into being, as if it was going to destroy everything in its path. It made it impossible for people to avoid it. This was the simplest, most direct, and also the most unfancy saber. With an unparalleled domineering aura, it slashed towards the incomparably huge Xingcha. Didn't Yuhuan Tianzuan want to ride Xingcha to Supreme Palace enclosure? Since he couldn't kill Tabagui, he might as well destroy the ship. As long as Xingcha was destroyed, with the flying speed of Yuhuan Tianzuan and the others, when would they be able to fly to Supreme Palace enclosure? The journey to the stars is long and the sky is high. Don't worry, I will play with you slowly. Chapter 491. 3 breaths. It took less than 10 seconds. After Yuhuan Tianzuan sacrificed himself to block Qin Shi's attack for Tabagui, who had narrowly escaped death, pinned all his hopes on Xingcha. At that moment, Tabagui only felt that his mind was blank. Everything in the outside world seemed to have nothing to do with him anymore. The only thing that could attract his attention was this faintly fluorescent high-grade spirit stone in front of him. As long as this high-grade spirit stone in front of him suddenly bloomed, it meant that Xingcha could perform a space jump. 1 breath. 2 breaths. 3 breaths. When Tabagui exhaled a mouthful of turbid air for the 3rd time, his eyes suddenly burst with a burst of light, and the excitement on his face was even more indescribable. However, what Tabagui didn't know was, just as he was excited, Qin Shi, who was standing proudly at the stern of the ship, also slashed out with the long saber in his hand. Red Sun Saber Technique's 3rd move, one saber cleaves the sky. This was a saber condensed from the true essence of a Dongshu stage cultivator. Qin Shi hadn't even slashed out, but this saber light was already like a pillar supporting the sky, instantly increasing by hundreds of times. In terms of length, it was even much longer than the huge Xingcha in front of him. "Break for me!" Qin Shi roared, and he finally slashed out with the saber in his hand. This saber light drew a perfect arc in the air at a speed that was difficult to see with the naked eye. It flashed from top to bottom. Its speed was so fast that it made people speechless. The people on the ship didn't even have time to react before the saber light flashed past their eyes. "It's over." Yuhuan Tianzuan watched all this happen, but he was powerless to stop it. But just when he was in despair, a burst of extremely strong light suddenly bloomed in front of Yuhuan Tianzuan's eyes. The light was so dazzling that it was even brighter than the afternoon sun. At that moment, time stood still. It was truly still, because Xingcha had successfully entered the space jump state. Too late. Qin Shi had always been outside Xingcha's defensive array formation, so when Xingcha performed the space jump, she did not bring him along with her. Therefore, he could only watch as Xingcha turned into a ray of light and disappeared from his sight. The entire world finally quieted down. Qin Shi turned his head to look at Mars, which was not far away from him, and then turned back to look in the direction of Earth. The azure blue planet was still floating there quietly. This scene was very familiar to Qin Shi. Just like the day he returned, this azure planet was also quietly floating there. At that time, Nian was only a little over 4 years old. In the blink of an eye, Nian was almost 7 years old. That's right, when the spring is over and summer comes again, Nian was 7 years old. A second ago, she was still busy killing people, but in the next second she suddenly thought of her daughter. Just like that, heavenly venerable Yu Huan and the others slipped away right in front of him. However, he didn't seem to be in a hurry at all. Instead, he was like a lunatic as he floated in space and laughed foolishly. But the good thing was, his gaffe did not last long. After raising his hand and making a flying kiss gesture toward Earth, Shi immediately put away the smile on his face. Nian, wait for me, Dad will be back soon. After saying that, Shi took a deep look at the azure blue planet in front of him, then immediately turned around and followed the law threads left behind by Xingcha. Run to where? So what if he ran to the ends of the earth? He had to keep his word. If he said he would kill your whole family, he would definitely kill your whole family. Otherwise, how could Shi continue to live? Unlike Changhua and Yiji, the two brats who ran away from home, Tobagwe brought enough high-grade spirit stones on this trip. Therefore, after successfully getting rid of Shi, Tobagwe did not stop for a moment. Every time Xingcha completed a jump, he would immediately replace it with a new high-grade spirit stone. After Xingcha completed the 7th jump, Tobagwe finally breathed a sigh of relief. He turned around and announced to everyone, "Everyone, we are home." Tobagwe probably emphasized the word, home. Naturally, there was no need to explain the meaning behind his words. "We're home." Hearing this, everyone on the ship could not help but look at each other. Just a second ago, they were still struggling under the shadow of Shi. How did they suddenly reach their destination in the next second? So fast. You don't have to doubt, please look, this is the Supreme Palace enclosure. After saying that, Tobagwe came to the guardrail, then smiled and pointed to a place not far ahead. A continental plate quietly floating in the universe. If the universe was compared to the sea and the earth was compared to a basketball, then this continent was a small sampan in the sea. This was the Supreme Palace enclosure, an existence that seriously violated the common sense of physics. However, its existence also indirectly proved that the ancient people's conjecture was correct. That is, the sky was round and the earth was round. The Supreme Palace enclosure did not have a sea. At the end of the land was the boundless void of the universe. In addition, although the Supreme Palace enclosure was not a planet, it still had a layer of complex cloud structure similar to the atmosphere. Therefore, looking from a distance from Xingcha, it was actually more like a landscape rockery of a rich family. However, the area of this rockery was much larger than the Earth. It was at least twice the size of the Earth. So don't compete with me in terms of reading volume, and don't act all high and mighty in front of me. Because I really thought it was ridiculous. Let's not talk about those that we've seen before, for example, the most popular ones recently. Haunted House, Machinist, Best Friend, Best Son-in-Law. Even when the lifestyle game was just released, I could already guess that it had 10,000 subscribers when it only had 80,000 words. But reading a book and writing a book were two different things. He had clearly thought of the plot in his head, but when he wrote it out, the flavor would always change. This was the so-called power of the brush. I had absolutely no control over what I wanted to write. This was also the main reason why many rookies couldn't even sign a contract. All this time, I've been thinking about it over and over. Think about how to improve yourself. To be honest, I've improved a lot. After all, he had been writing for so many years. His basic skills were still very solid. Now that he had the experience of 10,000 orders, if he didn't improve, then wouldn't he be a fool? But because the framework of cultivation Dad had already been established, I couldn't express it at all. I could only continue writing according to the existing framework. Writing a book was actually like building a house. The foundation of this book was clearly the foundation of a villa, but after I built the foundation, I simply built a straw shed on top of it. Now, I didn't want to live in a straw shed. I wanted to build a villa on top of the straw shed. Then, other than tearing it down and rebuilding it, was there any other way? This was writing a book. Many people would choose to tear down the bridge and rebuild it. I was different. Since I couldn't live in a villa, I would renovate the straw shed. That was my idea. It was such a simple idea that it was somewhat inexplicable. And this was also the fundamental reason why I continued to persevere. Because I had once stood at the top of the mountain, I saw a different scenery. Now I had fallen to the bottom of the valley. But because of that unexpected experience, I couldn't help but look at the top of the mountain. The mountain man asked me, "Do you have hatred in your heart?" I answered, "No hatred." Then he asked, "Why?" At that moment, my answer was so firm. "Thank you for letting me see the scenery at the top of the mountain. If I fell, then so be it. I'll just walk again. But the next time, I want to walk more steadily. Slower, more steadily." That was all. March 3rd, 2019, early morning. The west window opened. Oh, right, this isn't a Unix declaration. The sun will rise as usual tomorrow, the west window will be as usual. Mwax, love you guys. Chapter 493. Formation. As soon as he heard these words, Tobagwe was so scared that he began to tremble. He looked in the direction that Heavenly Venerate Yuhuan was pointing at and saw that a beam of light had appeared diagonally above Xingcha at some point in time. Furthermore, it was rapidly flying in their direction. From a distance, this light was like a meteor. After drawing a beautiful straight line in the sky, it directly smashed in front of everyone. Bang! Before the person arrived, the sword arrived. Sure enough, it was Qin Shi chasing after them again. Seeing this, Yuhuan Tianzuan did not seem to be very surprised. His face turned cold, and then he ordered everyone in a loud voice, "5 divine generals, take your positions. Activate the innate 5 direction flags and set up the heavenly cycle stars formation. Rise." As soon as this order came out, there was a small commotion on the ship. What needed to be mentioned here was, after the Battle of Dragon Head Peak, the 5 divine generals of Tiandu and the Rakshasa Star Lord had lost a lot of people, so Yuhuan Tianzuan could only temporarily choose suitable successors from the existing survivors. These people's strength was not bad, but they had not undergone systematic training, so the moment they heard Yuhuan Tianzuan's order, they seemed a little flustered. To think that our Huang Tiandu, to think that he would end up without a successor, it's really lamentable. Looking at the clumsy positioning of these divine generals and star lords, Heavenly Lord Xuanzhen could not help but sigh. Hearing this, the faces of the 6 heavenly lords, including Yuhuan Tianzuan, flashed with a trace of sadness. Once upon a time, Tiandu was so glorious and strong. But now, the remnants of Tiandu, led by the 10 Directions heavenly lords, had become stray dogs at this moment. In order to avoid Qin Shi's pursuit, they were in a state of panic all day long. When they were still in the solar system, the heavenly lords did not feel that there was anything wrong with escaping to the Supreme Palace enclosure. But when they really came to the Supreme Palace enclosure and saw it floating quietly in the void, the celestial venerables suddenly felt a sense of helplessness from being outlanders. Yes, Earth was their home. It was just like how Tobagwe's home was in the Supreme Palace enclosure. Now that he had finally returned to the Supreme Palace enclosure, he would naturally be excited. This feeling of desolation was probably the so-called alone as a stranger in a strange land. Morale was low. At this time, Yuhuan Tianzuan seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly asked Tuoba Su, "How long until the reinforcements arrive?" Hearing this, Tobagwe was startled. He didn't seem to understand why Yuhuan Tianzuan didn't ask him directly, but instead asked him secretly. However, doubts were just doubts. Tobagwe honestly replied to Yuhuan Tianzuan with a sound transmission. The family has already given a clear reply, and the family head is on the way with people. According to my estimation, we'll be able to see the reinforcements in 30 minutes at most. Good. Then we'll hold on for another incense stick's worth of time. Yuan Tianzuan nodded calmly at Tabagui, then turned around and flew to the side of the high platform. He lowered his head and looked around the audience, then suddenly let out a long roar towards the sky, angrily roaring, "Hateful! Even if we abandon our home and flee to a foreign land, the thief is not willing to let us live. We have been forced into a corner. So I've decided, instead of being trampled on and humiliated like this, it's better to go all out and fight to the death with that evil thief. Yu Huan is here to ask everyone, today, are you willing to fight with me?" As soon as these words came out, the audience boiled over. Before, everyone was busy running for their lives, so they couldn't raise any morale. Now that they had come to the Supreme Palace enclosure, this strange place in front of them seemed to give them infinite courage. That's right, they had even lost their home, so what was the use of keeping their lives? Where was the integrity of Tiandu? Where was the glory of Tiandu? After thinking of their last trace of dignity, everyone's fighting spirit was immediately summoned by Yuan Tianzuan. Fight, fight, fight! The moment the massive heavenly cycle star formation was set up, a silver-white shield suddenly appeared around Xingcha, protecting her within. In fact, this formation was not a killing formation, but more like an auxiliary formation. Its biggest function was to connect everyone in the formation together, so that their vital essences could be intertwined and converge to achieve the purpose of glory and glory. No, the power of the formation has decreased by at least 30% after losing the central Wuji apricot yellow flag. Let me be the eye of the formation. After saying that, Heavenly Lord Xuanzhen prepared to move to the lost corner. However, at this moment, Heavenly Venerable Yu Huan pulled him back without batting an eyelid and then shook his head slightly. What's wrong? Heavenly Lord Xuanzhen, who had always been straightforward, was confused. Heavenly Lord Wondrous Spell, who was next to him, directly pulled him to his side and softly explained to him. What? After hearing Heavenly Lord Wondrous Spell's explanation, Heavenly Lord Xuanzhen's expression was interesting. It turned out that Yuan Tianzuan wanted his subordinates to block the attack for him. Who did Chen Shi really want to kill? Wasn't it the Heavenly Lords present? As the leaders of Heaven Capital, the 7 of them were the real culprits that caused Earth to suffer. Since the 7 of them were no match for Chen Shi, then the best way. Obviously, they wanted their subordinates to block the attack. Now that the 7 of them were in the center of the formation, if Chen Shi wanted to successfully kill them, he had to break through the formation first. However, the formation connected everyone's lives tightly together. As the saying goes, unity is strength. If Chen Shi was determined to kill them, then he would kill everyone present first. It was just that these silly heavenly generals and star lords had been betrayed by Yuan Tianzuan without realizing it. Instead, they firmly believed that they were fighting for their dignity. It was just like the slogan they chanted, everything was for the prestige of the holy ancestor, everything was for the glory of Heaven Capital. With the appearance of Chen Shi, the final battle between him and Heaven Capital finally began. The remaining half of Xingcha was still flying in the universe. The fairy-like Supreme Palace enclosure was not far ahead. However, this last stretch of distance, it turned this Xingcha into a purgatory on Earth. Chen Shi attacked fiercely again and again, but the formation dissolved them into nothingness time and time again. It was true that he was a supreme. However, in such a short period of time, even a supreme was somewhat helpless in the face of such a tenacious resistance from everyone. Chen Shi was somewhat confused. What was wrong with these people? Why did they suddenly become so fearless of death? As soon as he showed himself, all sorts of magical treasures and spells would be thrown at him. He slashed at the formation's shield again and again. With every slash, the violent impact caused by the collision of true essence would be instantly dispersed to everyone. In the face of such frequent attacks, those with lower cultivation would be shaken to the point that their heart meridians would be broken and their 7 orifices would bleed. Even so, every time someone could not withstand the strong impact brought about by Chen Shi, they would immediately rush out of the formation and use their last breath to detonate their golden core, temporarily relieving some pressure on their companions behind them. The 7 celestial venerables stood on the high platform and watched everything in front of them. Although he could not bear it, Celestial Venerable Xuanzhen finally listened to Celestial Venerable Wondrous Spell's dissuasion. He stood on the high platform with the other Celestial Venerables and constantly pretended to gesture. Those who could cultivate to this level were not fools. Even ants wanted to live, so how could the Celestial Venerables not want to live? After all, they were the core of Heaven Capital, and at the same time, they were the future spark of Heaven Capital. As long as they could force Qin Shi to retreat and successfully enter the Supreme Palace enclosure, then Heaven Capital would usher in a new era. In the process of Xingqia flying to the Supreme Palace enclosure, the remnants of Heaven Capital fell one after another. Every time they self-destructed, it was like a festive firework, shining non-stop in this silent universe. After enduring for 3 breaths, another incense stick of time welcomed. Finally, after nearly half of the people on the ship were gone, a ray of light finally appeared in Yuhuan Tianzuan's eyes. Venerable One, look. That's the Toba family's flag. We're saved. Chapter 494. While the remnants of Tiandu were struggling to resist Qin Shi's attack, Tobague's cry of, "We are saved," was no less exciting than a stimulant. Hearing this, Empyrean Yuhuan hurriedly turned his head and looked in the direction Tobague was pointing, only to see dozens of star carts flying over at an extremely fast speed. When these starships approached, Yuhuan Tianzuan finally saw the flag of the Tuoba family hanging high on the mast of the main ship. The flag was very exquisite and was definitely not ordinary. There were 2 words written on it, and the flag was embroidered with sea water patterns and clouds. It seemed to imply that the Tuoba family had a long and prosperous history. The reinforcements Tobague had been waiting for, they had finally arrived. There were a total of 24 starships that came to support. When they were about to approach the location of Tobague's group, these starships immediately took the lead with the main ship, and the rest split into 2 sides and spread out in a goose formation. Looking at their momentum, there was a faint air of military formation. Seeing this, Qin Shi temporarily withdrew his true essence and then quietly floated in the void, as if he wanted to see why this group of people had come. "Your Excellency is Mr. Qin? Tuoba Yi is here dash. Greetings, sir." After the starship stopped, a figure flew out at an extremely fast speed, and then went straight to Qin Shi. The 2 faced each other in space. Qin Shi sized up the other party, and the other party sized him up at the same time. This man who claimed to be the head of the Tuoba family had a cultivation base around the middle stage of divine transformation, which should be at the same level as Yuhuan Tianzuan. Perhaps because he knew that his cultivation base was far lower than Qin Shi, as soon as Tuoba Yi appeared, he took the initiative to respectfully greet Qin Shi. Qin Shi naturally knew why Tuoba Yi had come. Therefore, he didn't even bother to waste time with the other party. After waving his hand indifferently, Qin Shi said coldly, "Since I have chased you all the way here today, I have already made it clear that I will never let this matter go. Get out of the way. You can't stop me." After saying that, Qin Shi's figure disappeared from Tuoba Yi's sight. By the time Tuoba Yi came back to his senses, Qin Shi had already caught up with the dilapidated Xingqia in front of him and continued to demolish it. Bang! When the sword light emitted by Qin Shi once again collided with the large array, a strong wave of true essence instantly set off in the void. At that moment, the joy of seeing the reinforcements immediately fell to the bottom of the valley. Even though the Tuoba family's reinforcements had arrived, the situation didn't seem to have improved. Qin Shi was still attacking the formation. Everyone was still struggling to hold on under his attacks. Inside the array,